seconded by Alex. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, the agenda is set. Turning to item B1 on the agenda, we have a public hearing for ZA 2023-06, Crescent Development, a request to rezone a 13.68 acre site to Downtown District Conditional District, DDCD, to accommodate a mixed-use master plan community. Now, this is a public hearing, and we actually initially opened the public hearing back in October, I believe, and continued it until May, and then continued it again until today. So we do not need a motion to go into public hearing. We already are in public hearing. And just to give everyone sort of the lay of the land, we will have staff present their presentation on this application. There may be more than one individual presenting certain aspects of the information. Council will ask questions of staff members presenting, and then following that, the applicant will present their case, and I believe they have some additional individuals from the engineering firm Withers Ravenel, as well as the county, that will be presenting during their portion of the case. We also have public comment, and we have a number of people who have signed up for public comment at this hearing, and we'll just play it by ear, depending on how long the staff presentation takes. I may decide to do the public comment before the applicant presents, but we'll just see how it goes. And so after everyone has said their piece and all questions have been asked and hopefully answered, we will close the public hearing and deliberate on the proposed ordinance.
Question.
Yes.
Just can you kind of go back over what you were saying about the public comment? You're not going to be doing that first, or?
Well, typically we do staff, applicant, public comment. But if you remember Lakeview Farms, when we have these lengthy staff presentations,
Well, yeah, that's what I was just thinking about, because this one's probably going to be pretty lengthy.
Yes.
I mean, I think if people are here to sign up to speak, I'd probably like to hear what they have to say
Yes.
at the time, as opposed to them having to go home.
yes, so that's why I said we'll play it by ear, because there are certain aspects of the case that are being, for lack of a better term, that are being presented as part of the applicant's presentation rather than staff presentation. So on the flip side, it might help to hear, say, from Withers and from the county. But I understand we'll see how long the staff presentation takes, and if the folks from the public have been waiting here quite a while, then I will use my executive discretion to go straight to public comment.
Okay, thank you.
And of course, public comment, everyone will. We have a slide with the rules. Everyone will get 3 minutes. As per usual, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. So, all right, well, let's start. Let's start with the staff presentation and our planning director, Tiffany Farrow.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. This is a continuation of public hearing ZA 2023-06 for the Crescent Development. And to get started this evening, I wanted to present the request before us, and that is to establish a conditional zoning district that would allow for a mixed-use master planned community to include 13,865 square feet of commercial space, 3,600 square feet of office and ancillary uses, 4 live-work units, 47 single-family attached townhome units, and 259 multifamily flats, which are separated over 5 unique buildings. The applicant on this project is Latt Purser and Associates, who is represented this evening by Jack Levinson. The parcel ID numbers associated with this request are PID 126073, 126078, 126079, 126080, and 215799. The property owner is Belmont Land and Investment Company, and there are 3 unique zoning designations on the existing parcels. One is Business Campus Development, or BCD. The other is Neighborhood Center Commercial, or NCC. And the last is Infill Residential Development, INFD. The The applicant is proposing conditional zoning that would also rezone the property, and the rezoning request is for Downtown District Conditional District, or DDCD. So, before we get into the details of the request, I wanted to share a bit of site history with you on the parcels associated here. So, in 1919, Crescent Spinning Company was formed by Stows and Linebergers. And post-World War I, the surrounding mill village in the area was constructed. In 1970, Far Yarns bought the Crescent Spinning Company, and in the 1980s, a warehouse addition was added to the mill, which was about 28,000 square feet, which remains as the only structure left on the property proposed for development. In the 1990s, Far renovated about 30 to 35 of the original mill homes nearby and constructed 130 new residential units, which is now part of the Adams Bluff community. So just to keep in mind that Adams Bluff was originally part of the Crescent Mill property, and it is no longer because that's already been developed as single-family detached residential. In 2004, Crescent Spinning Mill was ultimately closed, and so in 2005 is when the original mill building, not the addition, but the rest of it, was ultimately demolished. In 2008, Far actually deeded 8 acres of the remaining area of land to the city of Belmont, and that's where Gant Fields sit today, which is just to the south of the proposed development. Looking at the site conditions on the parcel the parcels proposed for development, the properties slope down, moving west to east about 16 feet. So you can see that that's in the burgundy arrow on the screen. And then moving from Catawba down towards Gant Fields, there is approximately an 8 to 10 foot decline running north to south. There is no floodway or floodplain present on the site, and the site is located within Belmont's protected watershed area, so it's not the critical, but is the next one over. This site is not currently identified as a brownfield location, but because it was a former mill site, more analysis would be completed during construction plan in order to ensure that that is still the case and respond accordingly during that analysis. As shared previously, the current zoning on the subject parcels includes business campus development, and that makes up about 8.12 acres of the site. Neighborhood center commercial, which comprises 3.71 acres, and infill development, which is 2.91 acres of the existing zoning designation. Nearby zoning around this parcel or group of parcels includes business campus development, general residential, and neighborhood center commercial. Looking more at where this project sits in proximity to other areas of Belmont, it is directly adjacent to what was formerly Main Street's River District, which is now known as East End. It's on the slide as River District because it corresponds with the Main Street District's image that you see on the right of that screen, which is shown in blue. It is approximately 3/4 of a mile from the historic downtown area, situated directly next to the Catawba River Antique Mall. Adams Bluff is located just to the north of the subject site, and industrial uses are nearby along Brook and Tucker, so to the south and to the west. Looking at the current site uses, we wanted to zoom up a little bit for you. So as you can see, there's a lot of what looks like vacant land, but there are several uses going on. With the first area, you see the 28,000 square foot building. That's the remaining portion of that mill addition that's currently being used for storage by the owner. There is a Duke Energy substation located on the subject parcel. The portion highlighted includes 3.71 acres that's currently being leased to the city of Belmont for use as Dwight Frady Field. And then another 0.7 acres is currently being leased to the city for parking, which includes approximately 54 parking spaces utilizing gravel. Based on the existing zoning designations on the lots, which there are 3, we wanted to share with you what could happen there today, and what uses are allowable within those zones. So the first is NCC, that's the area where Dwight Frady Field currently sits, and comprises 3.71 acres. The options there include single-family residential, lodging, which could be hotels or bed and breakfasts, offices, commercial, daycare centers, recreation facilities, funeral homes, or a cemetery, or civic uses. So a wide variety of uses that are potentially allowable based on the land development code on the subject site as it sits today. In infill development, which comprises 2.91 acres, that zoning designation would allow for bed and breakfasts, live, work, or home occupations, neighborhood stores, a daycare center, recreation facilities, and civic uses. And lastly, in the areas zoned business campus development, lodging, which again could include hotels or bed and breakfasts, offices, auxiliary commercial uses, light manufacturing, events facilities, daycare centers, recreational facilities, and civic uses would all be allowable by the Land Development Code. Instead, the applicant is proposing to transition the zoning of all of those associated parcels to the downtown district, and so because of that, I wanted to share with you a little bit about the intent of that district. Downtown district is coded in order to encourage the redevelopment and expansion of the traditional city center. It is intended to serve as the civic, cultural, and governmental hub of activity for the entire Belmont community. And individual buildings within this district are encouraged to be mixed vertically with street-level commercial and upper-level residential. Higher densities of residential development are encouraged within the downtown district. On this slide, you can see the city's current city small area plan, which is located in our comprehensive land use plan. While this plan is overall being updated currently, this small area plan is proposed to remain an integral part of the updated comprehensive land use plan as well, so remains active and valid. You can see here that the proposed site is outlined on your screen and located where there's that yellow star, and is within the areas currently envisioned for Center City Core or Center City Neighborhood, which is also a T&D overlay. Both of those encourage residential that supports increased non-automotive trip generation with the goal of having the residential uses in there support the Center City Core area businesses. So this project has been under review with the planning department for quite some time now, and as you may imagine, the plan has evolved over time, both based on staff feedback, community feedback, and input by council and planning board. And so just wanted to share with you a little bit of that project evolution this evening so that you guys can understand where we started from and where we are now with the plan. So the first iteration of the plan that was received by planning showed full development activity on the field for Dwight Frady Field, as well as all of the other subject parcels. It contained a mix of multifamily and single-family development, largely single-family attached, and you can see the layout as proposed on your screen there. Based on feedback received, that plan was further refined in order to minimize the development located on the portion of the site currently being activated for use as a park. And we received this plan, which retains a significant portion of the area being used as the park as open space, but does still show development along 6th Street, which impacts where the current baseball fields sit today. Again, you can see a mix of those multifamily buildings and different building types in this plan as well, with orientations slightly changing. And after additional feedback, the development team elected to remove all development from the site where Dwight Frady Field is located, and really take the amount of units that was going to be located on what's currently serving the city as a park, and instead elect to locate those all directly across the street in order to make sure that the park could be maintained. So that's the iteration you see there. And then what's different between this one and the one that I'm about to show you is You can see here that there are townhomes, but in this version, the townhomes were proposed to be all on one parcel, so that would not allow for individual units to be sold. And so the plans were then ultimately revised again to this version, and now we can see the townhomes are concentrated closer to Tucker Street and are individually set up to be platted and potentially sold. And then you can see there's just a more linear nature of the buildings fronting Catawba and then fronting on Brook Street there. In this version, you can see in the red, that area is what was originally reserved for commercial in this plan. And this plan included 281 multifamily units and 11,000 approximately square feet of commercial. So when we got this plan, we were still working with the development team on ways that we could enhance this to better meet the needs of our community. And ultimately, the plan before you this evening is this version here. And this is as a result of feedback primarily received during the community meetings from citizens and others during that entire process. So you can see here that the first floor of that building closest to the Catawba River Antique Mall is now fully being proposed as commercial use. And then a little bit on the second building there as well, and then the 4 live-work units. So closest to the existing downtown core, you'll see that commercial extension turning into live-work and then ultimately turning into residential. That area proposed for commercial now is close to 14,000 square feet. I believe it's 13,865 square feet in size. And the amount of multifamily has been reduced from 281 units down to 259 units, again with the 4 live-work as well. The number of townhomes is still 47. So, keeping this plan up and just looking at the architecture as we would flow or navigate through the site, we're starting at the corner of Catawba and Tucker. You can see what's proposed here is townhomes, and the look of those is shown on the image on your screen here. Those are proposed as 3-story townhomes with the first floor being brick aesthetic on the facade. Important to note here, the eave height, or where the roof starts, is capped at 32 feet with a max height at its peak of 42 feet. Moving to the 3-story residential building here. This is more representative. So some of the units do have ground level commercial, but all of these units that are multifamily along Catawba are 38 feet max in height. So those, you can see the image on the far left is what is the aesthetic or architecture being proposed for the units that have commercial frontage, and then the one in the middle there is for the units that do not have that commercial on the lower level. On the bottom left of your screen, you can see an image looking from Gant Field to the proposed multifamily structures. Those units closest to Brook are currently proposed as 4 stories. And again, that was in order to allow for the density that was once being placed on the site where the park is located in order to be reallocated onto this side of Catawba. And you can see on the upper levels there, on the corners of both of those buildings, there is a proposed patio that would allow for residents to overlook the park. Those structures are proposed as 4 stories with a 45-foot maximum. And as you recall from the site analysis, the site does slope down as you're going from Catawba to Brook, approximately 8 to 10 feet. So there's a 3-foot differential between the top of the townhomes and the top of these 4-story buildings, and then a 7-foot differential from the top of the multifamily along Catawba from the multifamily along Brook. So the differential is less than the slope change there, which means that the tops of the buildings would be roughly consistent at their peak. Further looking at architecture for the entire proposed project, the applicants have agreed to provide a master sign program for all commercial suites and signage on site. This will allow for uniformity as you're going through the community. All the buildings are subject to architectural review by the planning department to ensure consistency with what's being presented to you this evening. And we would look at both the approved plans and the elevations, as well as the renderings that are in your packet, to make sure that what's being delivered is what's consistent with what's being presented. The developer has also agreed to incorporate brick detailing similar to examples found on existing structures nearby and along East Catawba Street. And some of those examples or snippets are shown on the bottom images on your screen. You can see some detailing below windows, at the cornices, and even just some undulations in the brick just for the natural character of the area. Again, you can also see some of the metal detailing on accents like our water tower for East End, and some of those metal accents are also being proposed in the architectural elevations provided. Public art. So for public art, the developer actually coordinated with our Main Street Advisory Board in order to seek their input on how to enhance the proposed plan. And so they've included some of that feedback from Main Street into what the plan is that you are being asked to consider this evening. There was a location identified at the corner of the site that would be a great opportunity for a gateway type of art installation that's circled in red on your screen. And so, as such, the developer has reserved this area for future use for that purpose and committed $20,000 minimum towards public art being placed on this site, with the selection and installation of that exact piece of artwork to be managed by the Main Street Advisory Board, similar to how the management was done for the Chronicle Mill mural installation. Looking at the open space requirements for the site, in the downtown district, there is no requirement for open space. Per Chapter 7, in order to encourage development of residential units in the downtown district specifically, all such residential development is exempt from the open space provisions. That being said, this project is proposing to provide 4.5 acres of open space, which includes the dedication of Dwight Frady Field to the city of Belmont for continued use as a public park, if this project is approved, and community open spaces, which include a commercial courtyard, dog park, pool, and a green area in between the townhomes. In regards to meeting our trees and landscaping requirements, we do have a 5% tree save requirement, and the developer is proposing to meet this requirement by tree banking and installing trees along the Catawba Street frontage on the Dwight Frady Field side of the street. And this is actually based on community feedback in order to provide a more aesthetically friendly corridor as you're driving through town. They have also agreed to consult with an arborist to protect any existing trees as warranted that are worth saving and that can be saved based on the proposed development plan. And all new plantings to be installed by the developer have been committed to be installed at a larger caliber or a larger size than what's required in our land development code, so that they'll have a more mature start than what would otherwise be required by our code. They'll be a little bit larger, a little bit more stable, and able to root better. Looking at our parking requirements, this was a large point of conversation as we reviewed this proposed development. And so, per the Land Development Code, there was a total of 429 spaces required for residential uses on this site and 62 required spaces for commercial uses on this site, for a total of 491 required parking spaces. You can see that the breakdown of those residential types were 94 spaces required for the townhomes, 62 for commercial, and then 335 spaces required specifically for the multifamily uses as proposed. On the screen, as well as in your packet, I've also provided a breakdown for public parking in the area. Of note, the public parking that exists today in that area totals up to 87 spaces. That includes 54 spaces as noted on the gravel lot that exists where the city is currently leasing that area. And then there are 33 spaces in existing parking along Brook. That's the parking for Gant Field that was installed street side. There's 87 spaces today. Per the plan as proposed, there would be 165 public spaces available for use in the plan. The provided parking overall accommodates 592 parking spaces with the project. So that is more than 100 spaces above what the land development code requires. This project, based on its size and scale, was required to complete a transportation impact analysis. And Kimley Horn actually completed the TIA in November of 2022. The developer met their requirement to bring this project before you for consideration within the 2-year time frame. So again, the public hearing for this project was opened in October of 2024, so within that time frame. And we elected to continue it, but the TIA remains the same. Because of the project's location, instead of just analyzing vehicular traffic, the TIA actually included analysis of bicycle and pedestrian considerations as well. So all 3 were considered in the data and recommendations within that report. So from a vehicular perspective, what you can see here is that the project mitigations for intersections included a 125-foot left turn lane from Park onto Catawba, and then a 275-foot lane turning left from Catawba onto Keener. So there were 2 turn lanes identified as needed at the Park, Keener, Catawba intersection. And so in addition to those, there were some bike ped mitigations. But as you can see, the applicant is looking for your consideration for an alternative mitigation proposal. But just keep in mind what was actually determined to be needed by this based on the traffic analysis completed by Kimley Horn were those 2 turn lanes. There is another recommendation for vehicular traffic that was noted in this report, and that is specifically to look at extending the 20-mile-an-hour speed limit to Tucker. So continuing that from where downtown's 20-mile-an-hour district is now to Tucker, subject to this project's approval, as it would create a more pedestrian
further
scale.
past Tucker, right? It says east of Tucker, so
Yes.
like up to 10th Street.
It doesn't specify exactly how far, but you can see in that area in the pink highlight along Catawba, at minimum to the project's frontage along Catawba. And I know from preliminary conversations, this has been brought up at the TAC meetings within CDOT, and it's something that's under conversation right now. It's also a recommendation within the Vision Zero plan, so all of these things are consistent and something that we're looking at doing just as a city anyway, but also the importance of this would be highlighted even more so if this project comes online. Again, this TIA did include more than just vehicular improvements. So from the bicycle side, there was a recommendation for a bicycle lane along Catawba Street between 4th and Tucker. The developer is agreeing to install that as a part of this project. They are asking for relief of installation of a bicycle boulevard between 6th Street and Church Street at that intersection, and at Brook Street and Keener Boulevard intersection. Staff has reviewed this and is supportive of this request for relief, as there are other avenues for bicycle traffic in that area where a bicycle boulevard doesn't necessarily make as much sense as what it did at one point in former plans, which is where this recommendation was coming from. Again, from a vehicular standpoint, there was a southbound left turn lane along Park Street with 125-foot storage, as well as a westbound left turn lane along Catawba with 275-foot storage. You can see on the chart on your screen, per the proposed agreement and conditions of approval, the developer is instead offering a payment of $1,000 per unit that can contribute towards larger intersection improvements here, and would serve to meet the need and or exceed the need as represented by those mitigation efforts. They are agreeing to provide the internal protected stem of 100 foot as recommended in the TIA mitigation study, which was the only other vehicular traffic improvement here. So that alternative, just to kind of touch base on this a little bit, and then there are representatives here to talk about this in more detail on the development team side. This conversation with the development team was going on about the same time that the city was looking at realistically the need for further action at the Park and Catawba intersection. We have known for a while that more than just 2 turn lanes are needed to fully handle the volumes of traffic at the Park and Catawba intersection. And what that means is that we understand that there are turn lanes needed at all approaches. So in having conversations with the developer, we could have asked for the 2 turn lanes to be installed today, but what that practically meant would be that traffic would be stopped and or severely impacted in order for the installation of 2 turn lanes. Well, staff recognized that there were much larger improvements that would be needed that might make sense to back up and have more a holistic approach at this design. So it's not that the 2 turn lanes were a bad idea, but if we knew that we might need to invest in additional improvements at this intersection, the conversation was, does it make sense to look at this more holistically and see if something more can be done here in order to not just meet the need of this project, but the need of the greater community. That being said, the proposed intersection design that they are looking to contribute toward is the one that was prepared by Gannett Fleming during the bond prioritization process, which does include those turn lanes on all approaches. Of note, the Vision Zero traffic safety analysis that was completed as part of our adopted Vision Zero plan does indicate that this intersection alone is the 3rd most dangerous intersection in our community and is supportive of larger intersection improvements in this location. Because there is an alternative proposal being suggested by the development team as it relates to traffic improvements, we did ask for Kinley Horn to review the proposed strategy to make sure that at minimum the design of the holistic approach at the intersection would offset the demand and volume added by the proposed development. And so on your screen are the conclusions provided in that Kinley Horn memo, which for those that might not be able to see on the screen, I just want to make sure that we're highlighting. They did do a comparative review of the design as proposed by Gannett Fleming, as well as the data within their report, and are noting that the holistic intersection improvement approach that includes the turn lane on all 4 approaches would satisfy the TIA mitigations as required at this intersection. So Kinley Horn is comfortable with the alternative to their original recommendations for the 2 turn lanes, that this meets or exceeds those. Again, I mentioned that there were some additional pedestrian improvement commitments that are included in this project for our consideration. Number 1 is a 12-foot sidewalk along Catawba Street from 4th Street all the way to Tucker Street. Developer is committing to completing this installation. Curb extensions along Catawba Street, 4th Street, and Tucker Street. They are committing to install those. 8-foot on-street parallel parking along the south side of Catawba Street. They are committing to install those. That would be similar to what you're seeing in front of the Chronicle Mill project today on Catawba. Number 4, the recommendation was an 8-foot sidewalk along the north side of Brook Street between 5th Street and Tucker Street. They are proposing to provide a sidewalk, however, they are proposing a 6-foot sidewalk as an alternative to an 8-foot sidewalk, which we have, the sidewalk currently in front of Catawba is not very wide, and so the thought is to continue in something that's more similar in context. With Brook and Tucker as well, along the downside. Number 5, curb extensions along Brook Street and at the intersection between 5th Street and Tucker Street. They are committing to installing those. They are also committing to install 18-foot on-street angled parking along the north side of Brook between the curb extensions. They are proposing another alternative here for number 7, which is instead of an 8-foot sidewalk along the east side of 6th Street between Catawba Street and Church Street, which is along Frady Field side. There are some topographic constraints and utility constraints on that side, so the alternative being proposed here is to instead connect what's existing as a 3-foot sidewalk with a 5-foot sidewalk in order to make sure that pedestrian flow can flow throughout that site. And that is shown on the proposed site plan. So if you want to zoom up on what that looks like, it is on the plan itself as well. They are committed to high visibility crosswalk markings across 4th Street and Catawba Street, curb ramps on the east side of 4th Street at the crosswalk, and again, high visibility crosswalk markings along Catawba Street near 6th Street. So fully committing to 8 out of the 10 pedestrian improvements here and providing alternatives that the staff feels comfortable meet the intent of the recommended mitigations at the other 2 locations. And it continues. There are more. That's on that screen. There are up to 20 here. So I will just read them off. If you have any questions about any specifically, please let me know. But keep in mind, the only one alternative that they are recommending is that instead of an in-street yield sign, that a non-signalized crosswalk be placed at Catawba and Tucker and Church Streets at that intersection. Otherwise, they are committing to pedestrian-actuated rectangular rapid flashing beacons on both sides of the crosswalk at Catawba Street near 6th Street, curb ramps on both ends of the crosswalk at Catawba Street near 6th Street, curb extensions to reduce pedestrian and bicycle crossings and shorten their exposure to Catawba Street traffic, and to improve sight lines between pedestrians and bicyclists and other road users. They are agreeing to appropriate signage that would complement the rapid flashing beacons at Catawba and 6th Street, high visibility crosswalk markings at Catawba and on the west side of Tucker and Church Streets, in-street yields, curb ramps at Catawba Street and Tucker Street, high visibility crosswalk markings at Brook Street, west side of Tucker Street, curb ramps on north side of the crosswalk across Brook Street and Tucker, and curb extensions at Brook and Tucker Street.
Stop. Sorry, question.
Yes.
So on 16 with the alternative,
Yes.
so would the original proposal have just been yield to pedestrian sign in the roadway with no crosswalk?
That was our understanding, yes, and that's why we're looking at that alternative. It just would have been one of those little 3 to 4 foot signs that was sticking up that could be run over.
But
And
there
so
would
we
have been
wanted-
no crosswalk, so they're proposing no in-road yield sign, but a crosswalk.
Yes, that's correct.
And you're fine with that?
Yes.
Do you know why they're, I have to ask them, I suppose.
Well, I believe it was to increase visibility, and also there was some confusion as to the exact standards of an in-road yield sign and whether or not that was really going to address the safety concern, but I would let them speak to their desire for that alternative, but that was why staff supported this alternative request. With all developments, we do have to look for consistency with our comprehensive land use plan, as well as other long-range adopted plans. So in this case, because of the significant amount of pedestrian improvements, we also wanted to look at how these stacked up against our recently adopted pedestrian plans recommendations to see if any of the improvements that were recommended for us to consider installing would be able to be accomplished through this development. And there were some identified. Firstly, this project would include the construction of a 12-foot multi-use path along Catawba from 4th to Tucker Street. That was included as a recommendation of our PED plan. Construction of that 6-foot sidewalk along Brook from 5th to Tucker Street, and you can see that in yellow there. That's right in front of Gant Soccer Park. The construction of a 5-foot sidewalk along 6th Street, as you heard, there is a little bit of an alternative in order to connect into the 3-foot existing sidewalk there, but practically the intent of that is still fulfilled. A protected mid-block crossing with rapid flashing beacon at 6th and 7th Street, and a high visibility crossing at Tucker and Church Street. So all of these things were noted as recommendations for the city to consider investing in to increase pedestrian safety in that plan, and they are proposed to be installed by the developer of this project. For utilities, I will go over a couple bullet points, and then I will actually turn it over to Public Works Director Jonathan Wilson.
Perhaps this would be a good time to stop, and if we have any questions before you turn it over to,
Sure.
We can tackle utilities on their own, but
Sure.
why don't, if we've got questions on anything covered to date, why don't we ask Tiffany before she changes subjects and introduces Jonathan, and I'm sure we'll have some questions for Jonathan as well. Dive in.
Hey, so Tiffany, a little bit earlier in the slide, I didn't want to just stop you. So one of the things that we talk about, particularly in regards to what could be there, right?
Sure.
So let's start there. So we kind of, and I think sometimes over the years, at least what I've seen, sometimes there can be confusion in regards to definitions to certain types of buildable uses. So, for example, light manufacturing, I think it might be beneficial for folks to understand what the definition to light manufacturing could be, because that would be one of the allowable uses, as you had mentioned, in the existing area where the manufacturing facility was.
Sure, so light manufacturing still includes a pretty significant amount of truck use, or it can. One of the main distinctions between light and heavy manufacturing in our code is whether or not there's any loud noises, obnoxious smells, otherwise disruptive activity on the exterior, any exterior storage, things like that, trigger that over into any where it's no longer considered light manufacturing and would be considered heavy manufacturing.
But what wouldn't be included in that? It's essentially like if I think about a distribution center, for example.
It depends on, that would likely be considered warehousing, but in the land development code, it doesn't necessarily distinguish. It could still be considered light manufacturing. Where it gets distinguished is in the traffic count studies. I would like a chance to look up those definitions in the LDC to be able to read those to you if we want.
I think
Distinct
that would be
definitions
beneficial, because I think it's important for folks and everyone to understand what could be there and
Sure.
what the definition is. We can throw light manufacturing, but what is light manufacturing? Particularly for folks who live around that area, it'd
Sure.
probably be nice to understand that. When I think of distribution centers, if you think about a fulfillment center or distribution warehouse, and they're not manufacturing anything, they're moving goods, generally going to have a higher truckload of in and out, right? So if you think about light manufacturing, which we've had some in that general vicinity come in, right, and propose stuff, maybe there's not as much truckload to it. So again, I think it's important to understand and define those types of, those key terms.
And I would add to that, since that's an interesting subject, and I had a slightly different question on it. You say that these things are allowed by right in these specific zones, but there's sort of on top of that, there's another consideration, isn't there? In other words, we don't have the old major development plan process that we had for many years, that if there's a certain amount of trips generated, or I believe if a building is over a certain size, regardless of whether it would otherwise be by right, it would trigger conditional zoning. Is that correct?
That is correct. And so if there was a significant master plan and or mix of uses that was proposed all at one time that hit the trigger for conditional zoning, then that's absolutely true that it would come back before. If it is under that threshold and or if the parcels are subdivided off and then incrementally developed over time without a master plan, it may or may not come back before you.
But then there's a piece to that as well, that is the traffic component to a TIA. And if the TIA is then requested, then also could trigger conditional zoning that would be required for this area. So if you
Yes.
think about light manufacturing, to go back to this point, if truckloads and truck counts, which what we've seen historically were to be a piece of it, it could potentially trigger conditional zoning.
Yes, there is a potential and there's a wide unknown from our department. So, for instance, if there was a by right development on just the INFD portion that came in and the rest of it was to remain undeveloped or unproposed for development, if what was proposed on that portion of the site didn't trigger the need for a TIA or conditional zoning, it could potentially be developed by right. But if it does, depending on what's proposed there, if it meets those triggers, it could potentially move forward as conditional zoning. Any future plans here may include this entire collection of parcels, but do not have to. As a reminder, they're already subdivided into their own parcels, so even when we have subdivisions, sometimes depending on the subdivision, it does trigger development review, and based on the size might bring something before you guys. So it's not to say that it wouldn't, it's just to say that from a planning perspective, I want to be mindful, we can't guarantee that it would come back to you as a conditional zoning.
But the potential is there. It's not-
Yes, there's
Yes.
a
And
potential.
Yes, I acknowledge that. It would be, at this point, purely hypothetical. We wouldn't know. But my other question, I apologize, but while we're on the subject, but even if they were to do that separately for each parcel, as TIAs are vetted and conducted, you have to take into account other developments that might be approved but are not yet built. So, the second parcel that they might want to activate, that would have to account for any traffic that would be generated by the first parcel, even if it's not built out yet. Is that correct?
So it would, if it in and of itself triggered the need for a TIA. But if the project being proposed never triggers the need for a TIA, then that background data of the trips that are on the surrounding edges would never be taken into a factor because there would be no analysis being done.
But there's also a discretion to the staff as well in regards to when we should be implementing these types of traffic analysis. For example, if we have multiple different sites popping up and we see that they're high traffic in the aggregate, but let's say one is not triggering that, I would say as a council member and probably as a citizen as well, that staff should probably at that point say, we need to trigger a TIA to
Sure.
review the impact to this area.
Yeah, and our planning team would concur with that analysis. What becomes challenging for us is not knowing how many years it could take for things to build out, whether or not there's interest in doing that within a 5-year time window, in which case we might have some awareness that there's, activity going on, or whether or not there's a hold of the property to develop just a section, maybe under 3 acres now, and maybe hold it for 10 years and develop something else. And if it's spanned out that far, which we wouldn't have any control over, that would be where we would have a harder time making that call. But you're right, if things started popping up in a grouping like that within a short time frame, it would absolutely be on our radar to try to trigger something because we would know there was some additional demand flowing in that area.
Secondly to that, it should already be on our radar considering that this intersection that feeds into is the third most dangerous intersection, as you stated as well. So this area
Yes.
should already be hyper-focused in regards to mitigating any type of additional traffic or anything that could implement potential harm to people.
Yes,
Can we get a say on when the TIA is performed?
so that is, it's
Like,
done,
as in time of year? Because-
sure, so it's
usually done
done,
with schools and such.
Well, the reason why I ask is because for this particular project, it's sandwiched in between 2 parks. And I noticed it was done in November of '22 when these parks are not being used. So I was wondering if there was a way, if we know we're gonna have a development between 2 parks that are used during the summer, the spring, is there a way to do a TIA for that?
we can ask, but I think we would need to be mindful of how long we delay a development from moving forward in the review with a specific window unless it's otherwise codified as such. So right now, we don't have that codified to where they have to do a review during a certain time frame, other than school has to be in session. So that is something we have in the LDC. They do have to take peak hour counts, so if that peak hour is on a Saturday, then that peak hour is on a Saturday. So it doesn't accommodate that, but it doesn't give us enough discretion, in my opinion, to say that counts need to be taken in a specific month or a grouping of 3 months.
To Charlie's point, though, doesn't that leave some room for potential manipulation by the developer in terms of when they submit?
Especially just for this, because I mean, you're doing it in
I'm not talking
November. I know
about
it's
this,
just-
I'm talking about general.
I would say that to keep in mind that the consultant for transportation analysis works for the city of Belmont. So if there were concerns related to that, a lot of times those concerns are brought up during scoping. So if there were requests like that, normally scoping would be the time where we'd say, hey, well, maybe we should wait a month, or, would you be willing to wait 2 months to take that, to your point, to make sure that it's mindful. What becomes challenging is if, I actually would need to go back and look at that study. I can make a note here to look back at that study, just because I want to make sure we're talking apples to apples too. I want to know when those counts were actually taken for you. But it would be challenging for us to take those counts in the summer because we actually have a restriction on not taking them when school is out.
Well, I mean,
So-
you can do it with schools in session, just when the fields are being actively used.
Sure. Let me check and see when the counts themselves were taken, what month those were taken. I know when the report was completed, but that's not reflective of when the counts were taken.
The upshot of all these questions, though, is that, in terms of like alternative development on this site, we talk about by right, but there's a potential at least that what is understood as by right might actually be conditional based on the
Sure.
size and all the different considerations.
And even if it doesn't trigger that threshold, if they needed relief from any of our land development code requirements, even if it doesn't trigger the threshold for requiring a traffic study or any other threshold to go conditional, they can still voluntarily elect to go conditional in order to request relief from any of our land development code requirements. So there's just so many unknown factors about how the future of the land could go. It's hard for us to speak to definitively what the future could hold. Rather, we can analyze the project before us tonight, but it's just kind of hard to speak to exactly what this could result in if this project didn't move forward.
I don't want to stop you with your presentation if you have more. Or we-
I'm at a point where I can go and do some research if there's any questions you guys have while Jonathan's speaking. So if you have anything that I need to look at for grade development, it'd be great to know.
Probably not anything you need to look up, but with regard to the number of townhomes that are proposed in this
Yes.
project, I know we had a recent project that's already built out, that, as I understand it, was originally proposed as townhomes for sale. And the sales were very slow, and they were subsequently converted to multifamily rentals,
Okay.
via walls.
That's a little different because that one was in a mixed-use building. It was supposed to be condos rather than townhomes, but
But the
yes.
principle may still apply. So
Sure.
my question is, suppose that the number of for sale townhomes here is X, and let's say the sales are slow. Is there any latitude with the developer to deviate from what was originally approved? I mean, they could always sublease, right? The owner could always sublease, but is there any
Sure.
latitude that the developer has, to convert that to a multifamily rental versus a townhome for sale?
Sure, so I would say in the state of North Carolina, from the planning department's perspective, we are not able to dictate or require ownership versus rental. But keep in mind that this is a conditional zoning, and so I would allow the developer to speak to whether or not they would voluntarily agree to such a condition, and or if they would commit to doing so within the body of the HOA documents.
Any other questions for Tiffany at this time?
I do.
Go ahead.
So kind of talks about kind of that first piece there. So let's talk a little bit about like TIA itself. So as I know you're going to check when was it actually ran.
Sure.
I know from what generally it is usually when schools are in session. I know Kimberly Horn usually, but it would be nice to validate that.
Sure.
But this TIA, and I'm trying to recall from the years of the progression of this project, right, was initially, or had the latest one, I should say, was done November of 2022. That's correct?
That's right.
Now, with TIAs, pieces of it, this is sometimes where it gets a little unclear with me, but we're doing other TIAs for other projects that are going online that have come before us prior to, or excuse me, after the precedent has come. Now, when those TIAs are being done, is it also updating the data for this as well, or is
No.
it, so, okay, to that point then, the last time the TIA was ran for this vicinity, this area, was November of 2022. And that's the last piece of data that we have from a traffic impact analysis.
That's correct. So our code says that we can require an update to that analysis if the study is greater than 2 years old. And it was presented to you when it was less than 2 years old.
But now it's over.
It is over because but it was presented as less than 2 years old when we opened the public hearing.
So, again, I guess, you get into the hypotheticals again, but I mean, for me, when I'm traveling this area, I do feel like there's been quite an increase in the traffic component itself since November of 2022. So,
Sure.
again, referring back to kind of your statement in regards to third most dangerous intersection in this area, I would have anticipated, I guess, us to have some maybe more updated information when it came to traffic impact analysis, particularly in this area with the level of high density that's being proposed tonight.
Sure, so I'm trying to recollect whether or not there were any projects, I do not recall any multifamily or
Yeah.
significantly dense projects that have come online since the analysis was completed.
That was gonna be my question, because this factors in the whatever the Morris is called these days, and Chronicle.
That's
And
right.
so I was trying to think whether there was actually any additional projects that would impact these intersections that have come through that would need to be accounted for but aren't in this
Correct.
TIA, and I don't know if I can recall any.
I do not recall any, if there's none on our radar as well. It's not that we're not acknowledging that there's a traffic uptick just based on natural growth patterns, but also keep in mind that what's being proposed here is a more holistic intersection improvement that goes above and beyond the
Well, we'll
demand
get
that's
to
being
that. I
required.
think that's kind of a separate piece that has to be discussed, but I'm
Sure.
just kind of talking about from the impact analysis itself. Now, there is one, right, Lakeview Farms, if you think about it, once that comes online. So if folks are traveling from Charlotte, hit the cut through down East Catawba Street, and then head down South Point Road, which we see a lot of that today, right? So, or coming down Parkdale Drive, and then trying to take a left down there on Keener. So we have had an approval to a project, not that it's online
Well, was
today.
Intersection included within the Lakeview Farms analysis?
So our TIAs are intersections within 1 mile of the project, because the other traffic flow is considered as part of the background traffic that's extrapolated at a certain growth rate. So it's not to say it's not factored in, but the direct analysis is done within a 1 mile radius. So Lakeview Farms would be outside of the 1 mile.
So with Del Webb, right? So as Del Webb comes online, and potentially folks, again, who are working in Charlotte and coming down and using this, and we'll get to it with the traffic improvements, and obviously we'll highlight the benefits associated with that. But what I'm trying to get at today, this is an extremely terrible road, particularly when it comes to traffic impact. So again, with the level of density that's coming in or being proposed, I just want to make sure that we're dotting our I's and crossing our T's, because right now, today it's terrible. So we'll get into the improvements and maybe the timeline of the improvements, but it's something that we need to consider. Again, I'd like to refer back to, and I'm not trying to continue to repeat this, but it's concerning to me, again, that this is one of the third most dangerous intersections within this area, right? So again, just
Sure.
trying to highlight that.
Sure, and I think we're all aware that it's dangerous, and from the planning department's perspective, just trying to bring forward opportunities for discussion, whether or not, you would like to take this one or not, but just, what can be done, and are there collaborations that are possible in order for realistic solutions at that intersection? And so this is one of those, and I'm thankful for the questions and happy to provide any additional feedback or clarification.
All right, I was looking, I saved you a trip.
Thank you.
When was this? Peak period, 6:30 to 8:30 a.m. and 4:30 to 7 p.m. Turning movement, heavy vehicle, pedestrian, bicycle counts were performed by Quality Counts LLC on Tuesday, May 24th, 2022, when Gaston County Schools were in session.
I know they generally
45.
try to make sure the schools
The
in
schools have to be
session.
in session.
During that.
So it wasn't in November, it was in fact in the spring.
Sorry, I knew I had seen it.
That's okay, thank you for looking that up and
Yeah.
saving me the trip. I still owe you a definition of light manufacturing.
Yes, yes. Again, and not to get hung up on that, but I think it's important for people to understand, again, we're talking about one side, but also got to understand the other side of what could potentially be in this area, right? So,
Very fair. Are there any other definitions or types that you have any questions or would like me to look up further?
I don't, Parks, did you?
Parks has also saved me a trip. All right. Light manufacturing includes the assembly, fabrication, production, or processing of goods and materials using processes that ordinarily do not create noise, smoke, fumes, odors, glare, or health and safety hazards outside of the building or lot where such assembly, fabrication, production, or processing takes place, where such processes are housed entirely within a building, or where the area occupied by outdoor storage of goods and materials used in the assembly, fabrication, production, and processing does not exceed 25% of the floor area of all buildings on the lot. This shall not constitute uses that are considered heavy manufacturing, resource extraction, or recycling or salvage operations.
or I would also interpret to say a distribution center, so.
I will look to see if that's separately defined.
But if it says that warehousing can only take up a percentage of the actual floor itself, it would imply that the majority of that would have to be a
The
manufacturing.
outdoor storage can only take up a percentage of the square footage of the use within the building.
Yeah, but you also had mentioned, I think you had said, would not provide, what was it, the noise, the
Noise,
smells and all that
Yeah,
stuff.
yes, exactly.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Sort of on the same, in the same vein though, I mean, there were some of the other sort of background conditions that changed though, and I don't want to belabor the point too much, because part of the reason it's so old is that we've continued the hearing on several occasions, I know the sort of makeup of the uses and intensities referred to in the TIA is not quite what they're proposing now, and some of the, when they talk about the truck routes, there's references to Marlatex, and we know Donnie could tell us Marlatex is not there, but I think it's Lindell, the Danish company, is there, so I don't know whether those uses change any sort of portion of the analysis. And I know you're not Brady, so.
I am in fact not, but I
Yes.
did want to make sure that I did follow up on your distribution center. It's currently not separately defined in the land development code.
I think that's something we need to probably define.
And so, you're right, there's a couple of industries that did change over. The Marlatex conversion over to Lindell did not trigger the need for a TIA. However, that one was brought before you all as a special use permit. And so, it's our understanding that that applicant and business is still working on getting fully situated and fully functional. I mean, they're operational today, but as you recall, there was a phased approach for the build out of that project, and so working with them. I apologize, Mayor Pro Tem, were there other ones that you were acknowledging?
Those are the main ones that I was thinking of, just that, I think some of the unit makeup and commercial space was different, and then
Yes.
I know they're talking about the truck traffic from Marlatex, and I didn't know whether Lindell would be significantly different to change any of the analysis.
I would like to defer to Donnie in case he remembers or recalls any differential in truck traffic generation from the two businesses when they proposed and analyzed that. When it comes to some of the differences, keep in mind that over time, from the time the TIA was first performed to today, the number of multifamily units has actually decreased. The commercial has increased, so that does play a factor. Again, these are ground level commercial with the intent of serving and complementing the city's core. So it's not to say that there are no people that will visit the site. We absolutely hope that people do support the retail businesses that are proposed as part of this project. But part of that is not just vehicular traffic, but pedestrian as well, if the plan is designed right.
Any other questions at this juncture? I probably will have some when Alex has his questions about the Park Catawba holistic intersection improvements.
Sure.
He might ask some of the same questions, but I'll reserve those. Just a few others. You talked about like the watershed, and it's what, the protected, not the critical.
That is correct.
And will it need a high-density development permit from the Watershed Review Board?
It will.
Okay, so that would, should it be approved tonight, that would come later.
It would come at the time of construction plan approval, yes.
Okay, and we talked about how there's 592 spaces being offered, which is over 100 more than the 491 required.
Yes.
Does this 592, is that inclusive or exclusive of, let's say, driveways and garages for the townhomes?
It includes the driveways, but not the garages.
Okay, all right, so there's actually,
So,
for those who
ask the
actually,
developer that, but,
Yeah.
so help, if we're on this now, help me understand that.
Sure, so we do not count parking spaces that are inside a garage because what we have found is that practically a lot of homeowners and or even renters do not use garages for parking.
yeah.
So we have,
Mine's certainly not.
we do not count those spaces, so we count the ones that are in the driveway.
And on that vein, and maybe it's a question more for the developer, but, kind of zeroing in, is every townhome gonna have, what's the driveway specs for each townhome?
Sure, so if we go to the plan, I will let them speak specifically to the specs,
That's okay.
but we did go over this because I know that in some previous townhome developments, the driveways were shallow. So you can see here that they are not proposing shallow ones, but I
They'd have, I
believe
think I
they're
read
20
somewhere,
feet.
they'd have 2 cars, the ability to.
Okay. Did you
I
hear
thought
that?
I read somewhere in the report that they'd have, you could stack 2 cars in the driveway. Yeah.
Stack two, I think one in the garage.
It's a minimum, it's 2 cars in the driveway and then at least 1 car in the garage.
Is how you, okay.
Which doesn't count.
I'm sorry?
Which is not counted.
The garage,
The garage,
the
right.
driveway's
So let
out.
me ask you this, are we counting the 2 cars in the driveway to your overall 590 something parking spots?
Yes.
Okay, okay.
And it sounds like there might be some clarification
Okay,
by the project team to
That's why I was
allocate some
gonna
of
wait
the
until
scope.
the developer.
Sure.
all right. And my only, just two more, the public, so we talked about Gant Field and the public parking spaces, so those, when you say public parking spaces, those are not assigned to any, resident of a unit,
That's
or,
correct.
so like those theoretically would be available, I just wanna, that, you know, instead of the gravel lots, we've got all these other spaces, but those are actually going to be available for people to park in when they come to the soccer games, is that correct?
Yes.
But they're also being used as the total count for the 592 for this project,
So,
correct?
so we can count, they can only count spaces, like, so the commercial, for instance, the public parking that's able to be counted there is only the public parking within 300 foot of the front door of the commercial spaces. So for instance, the commercial that's on Catawba couldn't count parking spaces that are located off of Brook Street, right? So that doesn't really work. If they're going to count any public spaces towards their count that's required, it's gonna have to be on the Catawba side, not next to the soccer fields. Yes, we do allow in the land development code for public parking spaces to count towards a portion, but you can see that still on the site, there is a significant amount of parking spaces in a parking lot in between all of the buildings as proposed.
And then just my last question, so there are well over 20 vehicular, pedestrian, and bicycle mitigations that were suggested by the TIA.
Yes.
And of those multiple mitigations, the only one, I understand they're suggesting a few alternatives, but the only one they're seeking relief from would be the bicycle boulevard.
That's correct, and staff concurs because we're not really sure the intent or the benefit of installation at that identified location.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else at this point, or shall we talk about utilities?
Excited for utilities? All
So
right.
utilities.
Bear with me, I'll get back to the very side. There you go.
Good evening. So the proposed development will utilize public water and sewer. The city recently completed a citywide sewer capacity study, which showed that there are capacity issues within the overall sanitary sewer collection system, specifically along the outfall that this project would tie into. However, there is sufficient capacity in the sanitary sewer system to handle the projected flows under normal conditions. This map here shows the area where the project would tie into. It's right in the center of the map. It would tie into the red area that follows Parkdale Drive, or Parkdale Road. This is a 2-year storm in the model, so it does identify capacity issues. And then on the 5-year storm, it also shows capacity issues in that trunk line system. However, it's not significantly greater than the 2-year storm.
Can you go back to those last couple of slides? Take a minute on each of them. And then 5-year. Thank you.
So, following the presentation of findings of the overall sewer capacity study that was presented to City Council, I believe, in April of this year, the applicant, committed to providing the city with an additional $300,000 allocated towards sewer repairs that would aid in offsetting the flow generated from the development. They have also contracted with Withers Ravenel to perform the sewer capacity study, to specifically study their project and how it would affect the city overall, and that specific trunk line. That memo has been provided in the packet, as well as a memo from myself, stating that the city can handle the projected project under normal conditions, and the additional $300,000 committed by the developer would aid the city in solving capacity issues in this area.
contracted out by the developer, correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Are we gonna hear from them to give a little more granular detail on that memo and what substantiated it?
We do have a representative here tonight from Withers Ravenel, and they could speak to it.
My understanding was that they're going to speak to it as part of the applicant's presentation. Any other questions for Jonathan?
Can you just go back to this, is that the end of your presentation now?
Yes.
Can you go back to those two maps again? Sure. So let's just go back to the 2-year real quick, because this is what we talked about at the last, or excuse me, during the sewer capacity study that was presented to us. So because one of the areas of concern was the main connector in there into that red line that we see going into the actual Belmont wastewater facility treatment plant, right? And now we gotta look at it holistically, because eventually that's gonna be going to Charlotte Water, but it's still gonna be coming out of that same connector area, correct?
Yes.
And then can you go over to the 5-year? And then back to the 2-year, and then 5 years? Thanks.
Freaking items.
Yeah, it is. Like an eye doctor. I do appreciate y'all including this, because I know I had asked for this, I didn't, it doesn't appear that there's much change other than up in that area for the Aberfall Village. Can you go back one more time? And then one more time again. Yeah. So, again, though, I think one of the concerns that we had discussed, though, is even at the 2-year and the 5-year, we've got this capacity, but when we thought about it, and we discussed this as council, when you think about the 2-year grant event, it should be events that happen every 2 years or so, right?
Correct.
When we were received the data from the firm itself, I believe, and maybe the firm can also correct me, but I know that they're speaking on behalf of the applicant, but they had said around 8, I think, 2-year storm events occurred in 1 year. So,
That's correct.
so again, I just want us to level set when we're saying a 2-year and a 5-year to be realistic to the approach and what this causes to our infrastructure, our existing infrastructure to this area. So the $300,000 is not going to increase the capacity in these existing areas by these pipes, right?
It
So,
would not increase the capacity, it could free up capacity.
okay, which is through the I&I process by mitigating in other areas where we have stormwater coming into our existing lines.
Correct.
Gotcha. But just so I, again, understand that, I want to level set that when we're saying 2-year and 5-year, there's multiple events that are happening more frequently than what we would probably, or what should be defined by a 2-year and 5-year. But I'll let the engineering firm kind of speak more to that, but just wanted to call that out.
Does this outputs from the Lucid model, is that right?
It's not the Lucid model, but it is the wastewater model.
Okay. So for instance, the red lines, does it provide any data in terms of if you're over capacity in the red, to what extent you're over capacity, or is it just like once you meet that threshold,
Once
whether
once
it's,
you meet that predetermined threshold in the model, it would change the color of the line.
so it could be 1% over capacity, it could be 30% over capacity. It's classified the same in terms of the color coding.
Correct. I believe that is correct, yes.
Sort of like the TIA, once you're like over whatever the threshold is, it's a C or a D, even if you're just over the threshold, although we know we have the data for that. But, any other questions?
Thank you.
I have a few. So if you remember back to the Withers Ravenel presentation at the workshop, I know we looked at sort of an alternative, and I don't want to use the wrong terminology if I call it a tie-in or whatever, but I remember there was an alternative that could have bypassed that area in red. If you know, why was that not pursued? And you might have explained it in the memo, and I just don't understand what you mean by tie-in and west outfall and things like that. But-
So the project could tie into a different system, a different trunk line system in the existing sewer system. It would travel east and then tie into the red section that is far on the right-hand side. So staff feels that it would be better to not add sewer line to the overall collection system that the city will then have to own and maintain in perpetuity, and to connect into existing sewer with the commitment of an additional $300,000 to help offset the inflow and infiltration that we are currently experiencing.
What is your professional opinion as to whether the applicant's proposed I&I reduction program will offset the additional demand associated with their project.
I think the amount of money they are committing will go a long way to assist the city in solving this problem.
But not,
But how do you quantify that? I mean,
At this time, we can't quantify it. We have to complete smoke testing, we have to actually find out what is causing that I&I.
Right,
Um,
we don't know yet, it could
we
be.
don't know.
But would it be meaningful? In other words, it's not gonna be like some of our payment and lieu that 6, 7 years later are still sitting there and nothing has happened and the situation's only gotten worse. And it's, like, there's a payment in lieu for the Park and Catawba intersection that's been sitting there for now 6 years. That's what I want, and I'll ask them where this 300,000 number came from. But, I just want to make sure that it's actually going to, something is going to happen. I mean, could we, well, go ahead.
Well, we do have a proposal on the table. We're working through some minor nuances and then also generating the purchase order. But right now, today, it costs approximately 42 cents to smoke test 1 linear foot of pipe. So this $300,000 will go a very long way to aid in smoke testing itself. If we were to line, it's cast in place lining of existing sewer lines for an 8-inch pipe. It's approximately $46 a foot. So this funding would give or allow the city to line, which is essentially a new pipe at that point, a little over a mile of sewer main.
Could we require, and this might be a Tiffany question, but could we require completion of the I&I reduction prior to construction or the issuance of building permits, sort of like we have with Lakeview Farms?
That may be a city attorney question. I don't know.
Well,
I'm by no means the attorney and would defer on attorney questions, but the question would really be, does the city want to take on that timeline commitment for ourselves? So we can add it into the conditional, conditions of approval, but if it's relating to the timeline that Jonathan would have to complete the work as it relates to the development, I just think we want to be mindful of how we word that.
okay. Well, we can, if we get to that point, we can talk about it. And just to clarify, this $300,000 contribution is in addition to the standard system development fees that the applicant would be paying.
That is correct. And those, based on the information provided by the applicant developer, total up to approximately $730,000.
That's good to know. And then just, we spent a lot of time talking about like modeling and contributions and I&I, but, putting all that aside, correct me if I'm wrong, but the development cannot begin unless and until sufficient utility capacity is available. Is that correct? That if there's not sufficient capacity available, you're not going to issue the permits to let them go forward?
Yes, I would say that's correct.
Okay. That's all the questions I have.
but I just want to recap on one thing that Jim brought up. The $300K that we're talking about to go to the I&I, we cannot say within a determining fact or whatnot that would mitigate the additional capacity that's being loaded into our system by adding on this development, correct?
That is correct. I cannot.
Do we know what percentage it could mitigate?
I don't, it really, it hinges on the smoke testing, honestly.
Just like the
It
chicken
could
and egg
be,
thing, right? You
yeah.
almost need to study before you can determine.
Because the smoke testing is just more diagnostic, it's not remediation of the issue.
Correct. That's a good point, too.
All right. Thank.
I just have a general question. What's the difference in this map and the lucid model that we're waiting for?
The lucid model ties more towards the land use and future projections within the collection system. This is looking at the collection system as it stands today.
The Lucid one, that's where we're gonna be able, or you guys are gonna be able to plug and play as we get developments come online, you're able to add those scenarios into it, and then it will like model it out to the city.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you, Sean.
County Utilities did want to go over some public safety commitments that are being proposed by the development team. And those include, and this, a lot of this is based off of some feedback we heard during the community meetings. So they are committing to private security cameras on the exteriors of all of the buildings containing multifamily flat style dwelling units. Coordination with the Belmont Police Department for the installation and maintenance of additional cameras on site. So these are typically referred to as like our flock safety cameras, in order to assist with neighborhood safety and security. And the developer is also offering the Belmont Police Department the opportunity to house a courtesy officer on site in exchange for rent reduction that would allow for a bit more of an affordable option for that officer. In exchange for the reduced rent, in order to live on site, that officer would attend regular safety and community meetings, promote a community watch program for the site, distribute safety information and communication, and coordinate with other officers on any crime-related issues that are identified, and provide some neighborhood patrols. So this is not a requirement, but this would be an opportunity to coordinate with the Belmont Police Department in the event that they would be interested in utilizing this type of program. Topics-wise, that was a lot of information to cover. Just wanted to kind of highlight the request for relief in exchange for the commitments being made by the developer for this proposed project. Specifically, the development is requesting some relief that would allow for the detached townhomes to face a private open space. So currently our land development code requires a front door to face a street. That's a design element requirement. And that is the case on some of the townhome units, but others do face more inwardly towards a shared open green space. So there is relief requested to allow for that design. That design has been vetted with Gaston County in order to have a solution for addressing and to ensure public safety and response. They're requesting relief on the heights of buildings C and D. As a reminder, these are the buildings along Brook Street, to allow for one additional story, bringing them from a 3-story structure to a 4-story structure, again, that's capped at 45 feet in height. Relief that would allow for angled or diagonal parking along Brook Street, and then for perpendicular parking along a proposed private street that's internal, instead of parallel spaces that would be otherwise required by the Land Development Code. All of this is consistent with what's shown on the plans that are included in your packet. They're asking for relief to not provide a sidewalk along the perimeter of the parking lot on the southern border that would typically be required. This is just north of the existing Chemtech building, but they are providing sidewalk connectivity around every other block of the site. There are some constraints they're seeking relief in that area. They are asking for your relief of our 5% pervious pavement requirement within the parking lot area. This is just to assist with ongoing maintenance, and sometimes these systems can be seen as effective, and other times they're not so much, and they can become challenging to maintain. So with the high volume of traffic for both the development as well as the public use nearby, they are proposing relief in this area. And then again, as noted in the transportation section, they are seeking your relief from any requirement to install that bicycle boulevard as recommended in the TIA.
One real quick one, Tiffany, I don't know the answer to this, but on that third bullet there, I imagine the angled is to get more parking spots in there than what we could they could potentially get with like the parallel spaces. But is there a safety component to that would want us to have the parallel versus the angle?
Sure, so all of those turning radiuses and things like that, keep in mind that you have, let me see if I can pull up the site. So I think looking at that's gonna be critical to understanding where that is. Okay. Okay, so if you can see along Brook Street, the parking spaces that we've already installed there are angled. They're not perpendicular, they're not parallel. So what they're proposing is to utilize angled parking on the opposite side of the street to mirror what's over there. But keeping that in mind for safety, during construction plan review, we would want to make sure that everybody has ample visibility for backing out and utilizing Brook Street as a thoroughfare.
That was the thing I was thinking about, is that 2 cars backing out at the same time, we had a car coming down there, but I just didn't know what y'all's professional opinion on that was.
Yeah, and so in theory, if there's enough space there, you can see that those angles and the street traffic going either way, both should be sort of moving like, whoop, like this, right?
Yeah,
Um,
got you.
But
we would want to make sure and verify all of those measurements during construction plans. And look at any signage that might be needed to make sure safety is maintained.
Okay, thank you.
Well, we're getting there, sorry about that. All right, so just in summary, this project did hold several community meetings. The first was in January of 2022, back prior to when the TIA was completed. This was held, there was an option held virtually as well as in person. Both of these combined together are what we refer to as community meeting number one. The developer then held several neighborhood meetings, one specifically with the Adams Bluff HOA back in July of 2024, and another with the Catawba Mills Lofts, the condos, in July of 2024 as well. And then those were more unofficial, didn't count as one of our required community meetings, but we do require two. So in August, following those smaller neighborhood-style meetings, they did hold another in-person meeting and completed that as well.
Can you speak to the attendance?
The attendance, it was well attended. I attended, and it was held at the Park Street United Methodist Church at the corner. And the applicant can speak to the exact number of the sign-up sheet. I believe there's an exhibit in your report as well that tracked that attendance, but overall it was very well attended.
Did we have staff at the applicants' two meetings, the neighborhood meetings?
The neighborhood meetings, no. And these really, the community meetings really are intended as the developer's opportunity to hear candidly from the community about what they like and what they don't like about projects. What we ask for as a requirement is a copy of those meeting minutes that capture all of the questions asked as well as the responses given to them in order to make sure that that information is properly received and we can verify that a proper record has been submitted. We have staff attend, but it's not technically a requirement that they have a staff member attend, but as a department, that is our goal, to attend to make sure that everybody remains in communication about what was said, and if any commitments are made in those meetings, we want to make sure that they're documented and then reflected on the plans.
Do you know what time those neighborhood meetings took place?
6:30.
6:30.
Well, the neighborhood meetings, I don't.
Those are in your report. There should be a copy of all those community meeting minutes that should say the time in addition to the date. So going back again to our comprehensive land use plan, this is, as we shared earlier, located within the Center City Small Area Plan and encompasses both the Center City core and TND overlay and vision land uses. Center City District incorporates the existing character of mixed uses in downtown Belmont to encourage redevelopment and new development in order to keep with the needs of a growing and vibrant community. So this project, from staff's perspective, is consistent with the vision as outlined in the plan. And it also envisions appropriate future land uses that include retail, residential, commercial, office, civic, and institutional, and parks and open space. So a wide variety of envisioned uses here. The proposed project includes retail, residential, other commercial, office, and some civic open space, as well as parks. So it's a lot of the uses as defined and listed in our comprehensive land use plan. It also notes that along commercial streets, ground floor uses shall be non-residential, and you can see that the proposed project includes commercial at the ground level for 13,000 square feet plus of that for the corner building closest to our existing downtown area. Ultimately, this project and the slides before you this evening were presented at the September 2024 Planning Board meeting, where the project was unanimously recommended with a vote of 8-0 to approve as presented. The one piece of information, as you may imagine, that was not included in presentation to Planning Board was the information related to sewer capacity, as that information was not yet available, but we have included that into the presentation for you this evening. Planning Board did find that the map amendment as proposed is a reasonable request and in the public's interest, and that the map amendment is consistent with the goals of the comprehensive land use plan, specifically in 3 areas. One of those being land use, in that it encourages a healthy tax base and mix of uses to promote a choice in housing, mobility, and recreation. Second is economy, that it provides a population that will help foster a vibrant economy with diversified tax base and balanced residential growth with employment and commerce. And community character, in that it will incorporate aesthetic features consistent with other projects located in East Belmont, specifically the Main Street
what was the River District that is now East End. With that, staff is asking that council receive staff's report. Any public comments this evening, approve as presented, approve as modified, or disapprove. As a reminder, when we get there, we will ask that you make 2 required findings, but don't worry, we have this slide later in the presentation as well, so we do not need to flip back to it. But it's with that, unless you have any further questions for staff, then I will conclude my presentation.
Any further questions?
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Tim.
You're welcome.
We might, at some point,
No
call you,
problem.
but,
No problem.
thank you. I will exercise my executive discretion, and we will go straight from this to public comment, given that we've been going for an hour and a half. But why don't we take a 5-minute break before public comment? That way, anyone who has come in since the meeting started and would like to sign up for public comment, the sheet will be up here, and I'll provide a pen. So if anyone would like to sign up during the recess, feel free, and then we'll begin with public comment in about 5 minutes. Stand in recess.
Peanuts in the car or something. Have some snacks. You've been to these things in Mitchelltown?
Public
Great.
Oh, yes.
What do you think? I think I can't wait to make my public comment. Get the hell out of here. There's just no way. We're gonna go through all this. The developer.
Yeah, we have to.
You know, this, I'm starting to get depressed.
It reminds me of how Jimmy and I was kind of back in these meetings, we go home, go to bed, and cry all night.
Yeah.
We just wouldn't talk to each other. Pressure, right?
Sure anybody's
Not enough
living
time to
in it.
check.
Order, order, order. So we're now we're going to have public comment. Do we have our public comment procedures? Yes, here we are. So all speakers have up to 3 minutes on any topic. Please state your name and address when you come up. Please be respectful of city council staff and the public. And we generally do not engage in back and forth with public comment. However, given the order of proceedings, there is a good chance that specific concerns may be addressed by the applicant during their portion of the presentation, but we shall see. All right, so the first speaker is Kathy Willett.
Willett, yes.
Yes.
Good evening, honorable members of City Council. My name is Kathy Willett. I reside at 294 Keener Boulevard in Stowe Manor Village. I want to express my strong opposition to the proposed rezoning and development of the 13-plus acre parcel you are currently considering for an apartment complex and townhouses. The plan, which consists of 259 apartments and 47 townhomes, commercial spaces, and extensive paved parking areas, would result in the destruction of one of the few remaining forested green spaces in our city. This parcel, as it exists now, is home to a significant stand of mature trees and represents a vital part of our urban ecosystem. As a resident who has witnessed an increasing number of these areas being clear-cut for high-density development, I urge the city to reconsider this trend and recognize the long-term value of preserving green spaces. Paving over natural landscapes has serious and lasting consequences. Blacktop and other impervious surfaces prevent rainwater from soaking into the ground, dramatically increasing stormwater runoff. This not only places additional strain on our stormwater infrastructure, but also leads to greater erosion, sedimentation in waterways, and the degradation of local water quality. Pollutants such as oil, heavy metals, and other toxins from vehicles collect on these surfaces and are washed directly into our streams and rivers during rain events, harming aquatic ecosystems and compromising water safety. The mature trees and brush on this land currently serve as a natural buffer, filtering rainwater, reducing runoff, and supporting our watershed's health. Losing this canopy would not only damage the local environment, but also contribute to the broader issue of urban heat islands and diminished air quality. Additionally, the proposed development would significantly worsen existing traffic congestion. The 2-lane road slated to serve this new housing complex is already overburdened and in need of relief, not further pressure. Introducing more than 400 additional vehicles into this corridor will exacerbate congestion, increase commute times, and heighten safety risks for all users of the roadway. Rather than approve this rezoning for dense development, I urge the city to designate funds to acquire and preserve this parcel and others as permanent green space. This would provide lasting value to the community, offering recreation, wildlife habitat, flood mitigation, and vital tree canopy preservation. Cities across the country are recognizing the importance of balancing development with ecological preservation. We have an opportunity to do the same thing here. In conclusion, I respectfully ask the council to deny the rezoning request and instead pursue options that will protect this parcel for the benefit of current and future residents. Let's invest in a livable, breathable city that values its natural spaces as much as its built environment. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Thank you. Next speaker is Al Wall.
council members, Miles, Parks. My name is Al Wall, and I live at 501 Camellia Street. You all know me because of my committee and volunteering activities in the community. But today I'm here only as a well-informed citizen, resident, taxpayer of Belmont. I normally like to sit in the back row and work quietly behind the scenes, but today I feel compelled to speak on behalf of approval of the Crescent Project. My wife and I have lived now in Belmont for over 10 years and have seen some dramatic changes. And we are fortunate to live next to a thriving city and a major airport, which drives much of the attractiveness of living in our beautiful community. I can't help but repeat here our city's vision statement. Belmont will be a vibrant, multi-generational community that incorporates small town charm, heritage, with an entrepreneurial spirit. We are so grateful to have so many compelling reasons to live here. But we know we can't stop growth and progress, especially because of where we live. So it's our job to find and support the highest and best use of any property that might be developed. And I think the Crescent Project meets that standard. This project is perfect with the intention of activating East End, and activating it truly requires a major development to make a difference. It checks all the boxes for smart growth. Plus, Brady Park is donated to the city. Planning and Zoning Advisory Board unanimously recommended approval. The city manager recommended approval. The sewer question has been largely answered and resolved, and the county is committing a major funding for the much-needed Park and Catawba intersection upgrade. In conclusion, I would hope we could agree to approve this project today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker is Elizabeth Atterbury.
Hello, my name is Elizabeth Atterbury. I live at 403 North Main Street, Belmont. Thank you, council members, for allowing me to have this 3 minutes to voice my opinion on the proposed project. I have been here 52 years. I married a man from Belmont we're living in the house that his grandfather built in 1924, 100 years old last year. We've seen a lot of changes. He's lived here his entire life, and we've seen a lot of changes through our town. We remember when the mills were huge in our area. We had mill families, and the mills took care of them, and that was appreciated. We've been through the times when the downtown was a ghost town. There was no thriving restaurants, there was no thriving businesses or anything like that. I know we're a bedroom community of Charlotte. I hate that word. I think that Belmont should have its own identity and not be a bedroom community of Charlotte. I just wonder, how long do the citizens of Belmont, how long do we have to wait for the city to take care of existing old streets and the infrastructure, the potholes that are in these streets, the repaving that needs to be done? Of course, you build new things when you have the new developments come in, but how about looking after the ones that have been here for years? Traffic. How can we get around this traffic? We have traffic from more Belmont citizens and from out of state and out of city people that drive through our town. I'm not ignorant. I know that there's always going to be change, but really, when does development end or at least slow down till the city can catch up with the needs that are needed in this town? Please deny this project. It's going to add more problems for our infrastructure and more traffic and just how things in general. And I have worked in this town for 52 years as a citizen and as a volunteer in many different avenues. And like you said, you all know me, and so I just hope you will think really hard on this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Dr. Stephen Hannon.
Good evening, and thank you for the service that you give to all of us for such a long time here. My name is Stephen Hannon. I'm an orthodontist. I practice at 301 Park Street. I started that 27 years ago. And Belmont was a little different then, as we all know, and Belmont has become the jewel. And it's become the jewel because of hard work by people sitting here looking at alternatives. And it's never 100% in zero. There's always some mix in between that you have to decipher. And you and your predecessors have done very well. You've made this place what it is. This project I'm wholeheartedly for. It has exactly what we need here to create more of a walkable city for us. I can easily walk over to this area from my office on Park Street. It's totally a great space to walk, but once you get there, you're wondering, where's the rest? And when we hear this, that we're going to have quality housing, that we're going to have quality businesses, there's spaces available for them, then this is an overwhelming step for us to really improve our town. This truly is the highest and best use of what we can do. So my urging to you really is to be innovative, to look at this, to say, well, how do we want to be in 10 years? What place should we be inhabiting? And I think we see the win in this. We don't want to be a one-street town. We want to have a number of different places where commercial businesses can thrive, where people shop, where we don't go to out of town, out of county things to spend. And I think create jobs locally, create enjoyment locally is the quest. Thanks for your help with this.
Thank you. Next speaker is John K. McGill.
Good evening, members of the City Council, Miles and Parks. It's an honor to be with you tonight. I'm John McGill. I live and pay taxes at 2232 Lake Ridge Drive. I've enjoyed that for 20-some years.
Which part?
Which part?
Living or paying taxes?
Well, mainly living. Not so much the paying taxes, but maybe you can help me out with that. Anyway, I'm here tonight to speak in favor of this. I think this is a quality development. I know that as City Council, you've been through a very challenging budget session with substantial cuts that had to be made. So we've got to find ways to increase our tax base and our revenue, but we need to have responsible growth. And I think this fits the definition of responsible growth. I think commercially we're going to double it. We would double the amount of commercial space on this end of Catawba Street, which will be very beneficial to the town. I think the residential development is going to be first class. I have the unfortunate experience of driving down Catawba Street several times a week on my way to my office in Charlotte and back. And I can tell you that most of the residential there, in terms of traffic, and traffic's important, most of those residents are traveling across the bridge to Charlotte and back. So yes, this intersection is problematic. It has been for years. But I don't think the traffic problem is going to be substantially increased by this project at that particular intersection because of the traffic flow that goes back and forth. Finally, I would point out that in terms of green space, I think this project is the ultimate live, work, play project that the town, city needs, that I don't know exists anywhere else in the city, to have that green space there. This property that's, as I understand it, will be donated to the city if the project is approved, is valued at over $2 million. I don't think the city would like to write a check for that, to be able to have that for recreational use. So this is an ideal way to own and gain control over that space, so you can use it for recreational needs in the future. So in my travels back and forth to Charlotte, it's rare for me to see those fields not being in use. The basketball courts down there get a whole lot of traffic, and I think the best way to maintain that and improve the quality of life is to be able to own and control that space. So anyway, I would strongly urge you to approve this project tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Joe Jordan.
Good evening, Council. I'm Miles Parks. Good to see you. You all know me, but my name is Joe Jordan. I live at 16 East Woodrow Avenue in Belmont. I am a lifelong Belmont resident and have seen it change tremendously. I am here tonight to voice my support for the proposed rezoning and ultimately the proposed Crescent project. To keep me on track, what I did is I made a couple bullet points as to what I think this will impact and how it will impact us in a positive way. First, I think increasing the tax basis is important for the city by adding a mix of commercial, residential, retail, and generating property tax revenues as well as sales tax revenues. It will also allow the city of Belmont to continue to use the Dwight Frady Field that is enjoyed by so many. And so often we drive by and we see that field in constant use. It will visually enhance the streetscape of East End, including the removal of old mill structures. It will further the goal of the economic development in East End by adding approximately 14,000 square feet of new commercial and retail space. It will contribute to the improvement of the Catawba Street and Park Street intersection. It will offer new opportunities for employment in Belmont. It will provide needed services to the surrounding community. After much consideration by the city and by the landowner and by the developer, it appears to me that the parties involved are proposing a project that will complement the balanced growth needed for Belmont, and that this growth fits squarely within the vision for East End in the yet-to-be-adopted but proposed updated comprehensive land use plan. In the event council should see fit to approve this project, I would ask that the council request the property owner to continue working with the Main Street Advisory Board and the Economic Vitality Committee to ensure that the commercial and retail tenants are addressing the current and future needs of our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Kathy Fisher.
Good evening. My name is Kathy, and I live at 2036 Street. And I do also support this project. And you were talking earlier about some community meetings. I did attend the community meeting that was with Adams Bluff at the Methodist Church. And I can confirm that it was very well attended and that it was also very well received by the landowner and the development people. They stayed, they answered all kinds of questions, and I can tell you specifically how their plan changed in regards to some of the input from the community from that meeting. I ended up in Belmont 26 years ago as my husband took a job transfer. We did not know anything about Belmont. We didn't know anybody in Belmont. And I will tell you, I think we hit the jackpot. The landowner, I think, loves Belmont as much as I love Belmont. And I think that really goes a long way with me. I think that they're very invested in how that project is going to turn out and what it will do for Belmont. Thank you. I do not know you, I do not know your names, but thank you for the questions that you asked regarding the allowable current site uses. I was very scared by that, and I don't know if that was the point of that slide, but that's how it felt for me, so I appreciate the discussion about that. Also, thank you for the discussion about the TIA being in 2022. I did not realize that when a TIA is going on or being done, that it does not take into other TIAs that are maybe going on other places in the city. So I thought, very surprised by that. I thought it was interesting. Like I see where it's in a mile radius. But anyway, thank you for talking about that. And just one thing, and not sure that this is what that meeting is for, but I think the 3-foot sidewalk that is on 6th Street, that is on Frady's side of the field, Frady's side of the street. I think it's 3 feet, and I think that they want to complete it at 5 feet, tie in 3 feet to 5 feet. And I think that's because of utilities that are along that street. But if it's not because of utilities, I would like to see it all be 5 feet. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Just in time. Our final speaker for public comment is John Church.
Yeah, we get 6 minutes. Thank you, council. Jennifer and I have been in the real estate business ever since we moved here 25 years ago, and we've been fortunate enough to be in Gaston County with the opportunities to do that. And so we've seen the growth here over that time, and we've had an opportunity to add a project here in town, as you're familiar with, Chronicle. And it took us 10 years to get that done. And a lot of this, what I hear today, brings back a lot of memories. But I want to thank the city for their cooperation with us to make that all happen. And I think that project has really been successful. It leased up in less than 90 days, which normally a project takes as much as 2 years to lease up. And some of the projects in other parts of this county are taking a lot longer to do that. So this community has a very strong demand for diversity in housing. And so we support the project and feel it'll be a good addition to add the kind of housing that this community needs. And in particular, what we found at the Chronicle was that not only were we attracting some of the millennials, but also the folks in town that were retiring and wanted to downsize. We got a large community of seniors that live in that community because it's close to downtown and all the things that need. The one big thing that I think this project will do is help connect the downtown to the East Belmont, which is a really important, they always talk about the Chronicle of Buffalo. So bringing this beautiful development with all the different housing options is going to be a good addition to the community. The other thing I think is really important is the developer. Our Starvin family has proven, I think, time and time again that they've done excellent projects in this county and fully dedicated as they've stuck with this project and done so much to modify their plans, meeting with the Main Street Committee. Very, very important to making this project what the community wants, not just what they want. So it's not an outside developer coming in town wanting to develop something. They're using a developer from Charlotte, Lapurser, who again has a stellar reputation for executing on projects. So the execution risk here is very low. These guys will come in and build a really, really good project that this community needs. The other thing that we focus on, I think is real important, is the economic impact. And you've got, we need to build, I know we've made comments about how we need to improve our infrastructure, but you're going to have 250 families that are gonna be here. We'll add almost $10 million in revenue, which is the sales tax, and that's your turn. But anyway, we support this project and like you guys to consider it and approve it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, well, that concludes public comment. So now the applicant will present what they have to say.
Good evening. We've got a PowerPoint. Can you all hear me okay?
Yep.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, members of City Council, and staff, City Manager. I'm John Carmichael, and I'm representing applicants tonight. Belmont Land and Investment Company and Matt Purser and Associates. With me tonight are Bill Karstarfman and Jess Trumbull with Belmont Land and Investment Company, and Matt Purser and Jack Levison with Matt Purser and Associates. Also in attendance tonight are Mr. Donnie Hicks, Executive Director of the Gaston County Economic Development Commission, Mr. Michael Holder with Gannett Fleming, and Mr. Joe Turner with Withers Rev Now. These gentlemen will either speak to you about their relevant topics or answer any questions that you may have. And we appreciate the opportunity to present the plan tonight. Now, this is the timeline of certain key events relating to this process. And the applicants have been working on this project for approximately 5 years. And some of that time, that 5-year period considers or takes into account the work that went into the plans and the proposed development prior to filing the sketch plan application on October 7th of 2021. So these are some of the important events. We had a virtual community meeting back on January 20, 2022. I know there was a question about the timing of that meeting. It was around the lunch hour, and it was a virtual meeting once again. That very night on January 20, we had our first in-person community meeting. That was very well attended. The zoning application was filed on June 6th of 2023. And by the way, I'm going to try to be really efficient. Tiffany, by the way, gives the most, I've been doing this 25 years. I'm not just saying this. She does by far the most thorough presentation of any planning person I've ever seen. So I'm not going to repeat everything.
Well, that's, I know as lawyers we go by the hour, but efficiency isn't.
No, you're right. But I don't like to waste your time, and she did such a good job. I may be repetitive a little bit, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, but I'll not go through the entire site plan. But we had, Mr. Levison had the meetings with Adams Bluff, Catawba Mills. We had a second in-person community meeting on August 8th of last year. That was very well attended as well. Planning Board, September 19th, 2024. The Planning Board, by unanimous vote, recommended approval. And of course, as you stated at the outset, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, the public hearing was opened on October 7th and continued to this day. Y'all know where the site is. I'm not going to go to that again. And by the way, the applicants have devoted over a 5-year period a great deal of time, effort, and energy and resources to develop a proposal that you'll consider tonight. And I think that's indicative of their commitment to provide a quality project to the town that meets a lot of the goals and objectives of your land use plan and addresses a lot of the concerns and comments that we've heard from staff and members of the community at these neighborhood meetings and concerns that we've heard from elected officials. Now, I can't look you in the eye and tell you that we've addressed every concern, but I can look you in the eye and tell you they've made every effort to do so. And I did say I've been doing this for 25 years, and I think no matter what happens tonight, and we respect that it's your decision, that we can all agree that this applicant has worked very diligently to address those concerns and comments. And as I stand here tonight, I'm proud to be a very minor part of that team. And we also are appreciative of the time that Tiffany, the city staff, and the Gaston County staff have devoted to the project. They've devoted a lot. We're appreciative of the time that you devoted to considering this proposal. So we want to recognize that. So the site's walkable to downtown. If you go up East Catawba Street, it's about a half-mile, 12-minute walk to Main Street. Do you understand what the request is? It's to go to DDCD to accommodate a master plan mixed-use development. These are the uses that we're seeking, and a part of that proposal is to dedicate and convey or donate to the town the 3.71 acre park site to the city for continued use as a public park. As Ms. Farrow stated, the proposal is consistent with the land use plan. We think it furthers a lot of the goals and objectives of the comprehensive plan. There are prior versions of the plan which many of you may have seen. The plan has evolved pretty significantly over the last 5 years. The most significant change has been how the park site has been treated. This is a plan from July 30, 2020. You can see that the entire park site is proposed to be developed. This is a plan from April 22, 2021. You can see that a portion of the park site is proposed to be developed. And then under the current plan, as you know, now I want to belabor, the park site would be donated to the town for use, continued use as a public park. The park site is part of the 13.68 acres, and it's a significant portion of the site that would be devoted to green space and obviously owned by the town. Also, there's been a reduction in the residential density and an increase in the amount of commercial space. A prior version of the plan had about 11,600 square feet of commercial uses and 281 multifamily flat dwelling units. The plan before you tonight has 13,685 square feet of commercial and 259 multifamily flat dwelling units. Tiffany did a great job of going over the plan, so I'm not going to really spend much time on that. I will say that I want to make sure that we point out a couple things. There's a proposed outdoor plaza area that would be located between 4th Street and that mixed-use building on the corner of 4th and East Catawba. There's also a pedestrian passage between that building, or in the middle of that building, to allow people to easily access the parking area from the retail at the front of that building and from the multi-use path on East Catawba Street. There's an outdoor courtyard. You'll see that in a moment in a rendering between that building at the corner of 4th and Catawba and the building at the corner of 5th and Catawba. And then that's the two 4-story buildings, building C and D across from the Gant soccer fields. Area 5 are the townhome units that have been discussed, and I will tell you that each townhome unit would have a driveway sufficient to accommodate 2 cars and a 2-car garage, so a total of 4 parking spaces. And there is, in addition to the park site, there's a lot of private open space or areas within the site. Those arrows point to those private open spaces. There are the green areas, there's an amenity space, and then there's a dog park along Tucker Street, right above the stormwater pond. These are the building renderings of the proposed development. And these renderings, as well as the architectural commitments that are part of conditions, really, at least in our mind, ensure the aesthetic quality of these buildings and the pleasant environment that will be created by the development of the site. This is heading east on East Catawba Street. The site is just on your right. That's 4th Street. That's the building at the corner of 4th and Catawba. This is heading west on East Catawba Street, just before Tucker Street. And to the rear on the left, you can see the proposed townhome units. There are 3-story units. And then this is a little closer to the intersection of Tucker and Catawba. Once again, you can see the house at the corner, and then you can see the townhome units on the left. And then this is the mixed-use building with the ground floor commercial at the corner of 4th and Catawba. You can see the outdoor plaza on the right. And then you can't see the passageway, but I'm going to show you that in a moment. And that's the commercial breezeway or passageway that allows shoppers and folks patronizing the commercial on the ground floor to get to the parking to the rear. There's not an on-street parking space in front of that building. This is the commercial courtyard between the mixed-use building at the corner of 4th and Catawba and the mixed-use building on the corner of 5th and Catawba. This is a closer-in view of that courtyard. You can see the brick along the front elevations. And then these are this is the 3-story mixed-use building at the corner of 5th and Catawba. And Tiffany pointed out the outdoor area on the 3rd floor there at the corner. And then these are the 2 4-story multifamily buildings on Brook Street across from the Gant soccer fields. Once again, the site slopes from East Catawba then this is a view of those two buildings from the Gant Park Fields. And then this is the rendering of the townhomes that Tiffany shared with you. And so there are a lot of conditions that are associated with this request. Once again, the donation of the park site, it represents 27% of the site. It has a appraised value of $2.6 million as of 2024. There are litany of uses allowed on the site under the current zoning, but the approval of this development would make sure that park site is preserved for use as a park and green space. Tiffany mentioned the public art at the corner of Tucker and Catawba, and the applicants have committed to spend at least $20,000 towards the implementation of that public art, and the Main Street Design Committee would oversee that public art process. I'm going to come back to the transportation in a moment because it's going to be a little longer, I think. But there are significant pedestrian and bicycle improvements and parking. Tiffany went through each one. They include the parallel recessed on-street parking on East Catawba, the bike lane, the 12-foot multi-use path, the high visibility crosswalk with a rapid flashing beacon at 6th and Catawba, sidewalks and on-street parking along the other street frontages, the sidewalk and 57 diagonal on-street parking spaces on Brook Street, bike racks, 30% more than code-required parking for multifamily and mixed-use buildings. The project does not rely on the on-street parking to meet its parking requirements. The trees landscaping, Tiffany mentioned this, but the trees planted would be larger than what's required under the development code, a half-inch larger. Landscaping and plantings would be planted around the BMP pond, in addition to the fencing. If a detention pond is a wet pond, then a fountain feature would be installed. Trees will be installed on the north side of East Catawba Street along the frontage of the park, along the park's frontage on East Catawba Street. And then the applicants would consult with an arborist to determine if any measures need to be implemented during the development of the site to protect existing trees located along the north side of Catawba Street between 4th and 6th. If measures are required, those measures will be implemented. At the community meeting, one of the community meetings, concerns were expressed about security. The conditions here were in direct response to those concerns. Tiffany went through those. Their architectural commitments, as mentioned. Tiffany went through those, but they would be designed to be, the multifamily mixed-use buildings would be designed to be consistent with the city of Belmont. There are building design requirements for the townhomes. And I mentioned that the town would have a 2-car garage and a 2-car driveway. The exterior building materials will be brick and cementitious siding. And once again, the renderings of these commitments ensure the aesthetic quality of this proposed development in terms of the vertical elements. There are a lot of benefits of this proposed development. These are some of the benefits, and they're put in a monetary value. And not all of this money is being spent by the applicant, but they are a result of the applicant's proposed development and some of the applicant's efforts. Once again, the park site, $2.6 million. In terms of traffic, they paid $310,000 to the city to be applied to the cost of holistic improvements at the intersection of Park and Catawba. And then the applicants initiated discussions with Gaston County and made the possibility of this interlocal agreement made possible. There's a consideration for this council. And under that interlocal development agreement, the county would fund up to $5 million to be applied to the cost of holistic improvements in the intersection of Park Street and Park Street and East Catawba Street pursuant to that interlocal agreement. Then sewer improvements. I'm going to have Mr. Turner speak in a moment about what he's done with the applicant in terms of sewer concerns. But, and then Mr. Starfin can talk about how they came up with the $300,000. But the applicant would pay $300,000 to the city to be used for the improvements that were discussed by the utilities director. That payment was based on consultation with the Belmont Director of Utilities and Withers right now. The sewer and water system fees, $689,180 paid by the applicant, and $490,053 water fees paid by the applicant. And both those payments would be at the commencement of construction, and it's based on your May 2025 schedule. In terms of the pedestrian improvements and the parking improvements along East Catawba, those are valued at $1 million. So that's a total of $10,389,233. And so we think that's pretty significant. Once again, the $5 million would come from the county, so we're not suggesting that comes out of the pocket of the applicant. But some of the benefits that of the proposed development include the East End revitalization, walkability is significantly improved, the generous amount of parking, the public art, larger trees, aesthetic controls, and then, in my mind at least, maybe one of the greatest benefits are the people that are proposing to do the development. The development team is comprised of Belmont Land and Investment Company and Matt Purser. Belmont Land Investment Company is a local and respected development firm with deep ties to the city of Belmont and is a long-term property holder. They hold their investments. Likewise, Matt Purser is a Charlotte-based development company that's been in business for over 60 years, developing commercial and multifamily projects. It develops quality projects, and it too is a long-term holder of its development projects. So, in my humble opinion, you couldn't ask for a better team to come to your city and develop, own, and manage this site. I think that's maybe the best condition that you have, is that you know the folks that would be developing it. In terms of tax revenues, total 2024 taxes paid city and county for the site were approximately $11,766. The total projected tax revenues from this project would be $674,365. So that would be a significant increase. In terms of the transportation, I mentioned the $310,000, and I alluded to the interlocal agreement. So the current condition that's being proposed would be the applicants agree to withhold the filing of construction plans for the city's review until the interlocal agreement between Gaston County and the city of Belmont has been executed by the parties. On the execution of the agreement by the parties, the applicant can move forward and file construction plans for the city's review. I think that the applicant will have to have a discussion with you all tonight, if you're inclined to approve the plan, about maybe a time frame for the execution of the interlocal agreement. We would appreciate the opportunity to have that discussion. I would like to ask Donnie Hicks if he could come up briefly and talk about his efforts in connection with the interlocal agreement, and then Mr. Turner could talk about the sewer, and then we're happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to start out with one piece of information. Every time you see me here, usually the county manager, Matt Black. Matt Roden is with me, and he has a serious personal matter he's attending to tonight. He can't be here. He wanted to let you know that he's still 100% committed to the project and what we talked about in the past. So when we started out on this project, we've done a number of multifamily projects throughout the whole county for different reasons. We've done a workforce housing project in Bessemer City to help stabilize the old mill that was built there. If we didn't do something to stabilize it, it was going to have to be torn down. The county was going to foreclose on it. We didn't want that to happen. So now we finished the Osage Mill project, and it's turned out to be one of the better workforce projects you'll find in the region. Obviously, we helped the churches with their bold vision to do this Chronicle Mill in Belmont, Center City Crossings and Gastonia, all through different methods. But the one reason that we've been doing this is to try to help the cities. We want to help them have a vibrant downtown. We need that city to be, all the cities to be as healthy as possible. Also to create renewed interest in living in the center city for whatever reason it is. If it's workforce housing, or in Belmont, we think we can have higher rent rates that will help us recruit other developers. We participated in each one of those in a different way. So when we started on this project, it was important to us to try to come over and help to build the city, create a tax base that's sustainable, and then also potentially help with the traffic situation you have. The only way that we can figure out that you can do that without a bond issue or finding some way to, other way to use debt is to create a project that has enough taxes from it that would be meaningful enough to help pay for road improvements. So that's what we're proposing to do, is to take the tax proceeds from this project, segregate those revenues, and then allocate those back to Belmont over a period of time to pay back 50% of the project cost, up to 50% of the project cost. And then we have worked with Miles on a number of options to help with initial land acquisition and potentially help front money to do the design of the road. But at the end of the day, we would segregate those revenues for whatever time period it takes to pay up to 50% of the value of it. Again, not trying to come over and tell Belmont how to develop itself, but we have put ourselves into a position where we have tried to help municipalities grow where we think it makes sense. We're not intending to subsidize every residential project that comes along, but for each one of those, there was something meaningful enough in it that the county felt like it was good to participate in. Ultimately, it helps us, but it also helps us by making the city stronger, which helps us also. I hope you're glad to answer any questions you have at the end. And obviously, if you approve this, then we're going to have another discussion about the interlocal agreement that would deliver those monies to you.
Any questions for Don? Maybe just so we're clarified, just so it's clear. So we're talking about $5 million or so that the county is willing to contribute to this project. 50% of that is going to be due back by the city of Belmont to the county, and then you're saying 50%, just so everyone's clear, is just being gifted to the city essentially to construct this? Or maybe let's talk a little bit in regards to the language, because I just want it to be clear for everyone in regards to how the payback is to this $5 million.
So our commitment is to pay back 50% of the cost of the road up to $5 million. So we're not doing the road project for you.
Yep.
We're enabling you to go do our revenue that's generated from this project.
Which would be an upfront, again, potentially $5 million upfront cash from the county
It
to
would,
the
it
city.
would not be upfront, it would be reimbursed.
Reimbursed. So again, the city would then bear the burden of paying for the road improvement and then reimbursed by the county, which then is reimbursed by tax revenue associated with the project. Is that correct?
So what we would do is, think about on the timeline. First, Miles and Matt and I have talked about the possibility of helping front some money for right-of-way acquisition and design pieces, because those are long lead time items that we need to get moving on prior to the revenue showing up. We can't generate the roads until the revenue shows up, the final road payment to that. So we want to get ahead of that, and we're going to front some money for those long lead time items. So as the road would be, you initiate construction, as that construction starts, the way we would typically pay this back is through, when you have a pay application that gets sent to the general contractor, it's sealed, you demonstrate that you send us the pay app, it's sealed, you show us that you paid the money, we would pay you for that pay application in. So we're not forcing you to find money to front the entire cost of the road. We're sharing that cost with you as it gets built. That way you don't have to go find additional money to float that money. We're going to pay as it goes.
At a rate of 50% though, right? So it would be 50/50.
Well,
That's what I'm trying to.
For the design and engineering and right-of-way acquisition, the county's paying 100% of that.
Okay.
But we're taking on, so the city's responsible for all the construction contracts and the design contracts. It's led completely by the city. The only thing that the county's gonna do is pay us back.
50% of the construction costs.
Well, yes, 50% up to that $5 million. So they'll take on, it'll be our contract for, the right-of-way acquisition and then for the design. Even though it's our contract, the county will pay 100% for it. And so, and that'll get us to the bid document phase where we go out to bid, we actually know the full cost of the construction project. That's a city project, and then we'll go down the path of paying, the contractor, who's developing the project, and then the county would pay back 50% of the pay applications, or possibly 100%. We didn't even talk about that, up to that $5 million amount. And so, they're going to contribute that 50% up to that $5 million.
What is the total estimate? And again, we did this recently in the bond project, but I guess we got additions with this, potentially with the additional turn lanes. What's the total estimated cost for this project?
So what we had prepared and shared with you all in a closed session was that city staff estimated that the design and permitting would be $1,009,500. And then Gannett Fleming, we used their amounts for, when they went through the bond transportation project for us, we used their estimates for the right-of-way acquisition was $730,000. utility relocation is 2.8 million, and then the full construction is 3.2 million.
It's a little over 10 million.
Correct, like, I think that's, what, 6.7 plus the million, is that what that is?
Yeah, so, and maybe this isn't the time for this discussion, but I guess just kind of coming out of the budget exercise, understanding, considering, we just passed a pretty much, you know, I mean, we've had to give some give and takes, but balanced budget, where, I guess my understanding, or maybe that's where we debate and try to understand, where's this additional money gonna come from? The way that I understand it, the way that I look at it, is there's a problem at this road intersection today, correct? What we did with Lakeview Farms, which is the most recent approval under the condition that they widen parts of South Point Road, is that that project is implemented and completed beforehand. Right. I don't see the possibility in this instance, and maybe we'll talk about timelines later, where this project could be completed beforehand. We've got a road which has been identified as the third most dangerous intersection in our community, and an already overcapacity road that we're gonna add additional traffic to, and we're not gonna be able to more than likely do this project ahead of time before folks start living into this area. I just want to make that abundantly clear.
Well, I think it's the city's responsibility to take that task on, if you're talking about when the project is completely, they're getting CO'd for their project. That's separate. The city's fully responsible for, if you all approve the project, approve the interlocal agreement, the city takes on the full responsibility to hire all the design professionals, acquire all the right of way, and hire the contractor to get the project complete in time. So, as far as like how long that'll possibly take, I mean, that's yet to be seen, but it's on the city at that point to get the project complete by the time we turn it over to have COs.
I completely understand that, but it's also on the city to fund this. So we're talking about multi-million-dollar project that we're gonna have to fund coming out of a balanced budget where we had to dip a little bit into the unassigned fund balance in order to pay pieces. Where's this $5 million, I guess, is where I'm trying to come from. That's either gonna come from a tax increase, which that is then passed through the entire city, which to compensate for this, I mean, it's an option, or potentially a bond, which we've already attempted, which failed. So again.
Well, couldn't we do the same thing that the county's proposing to do and use the increased tax revenues from the project to pay for it?
But the increased tax revenues aren't going to be realized until the rear. If you're talking about implementing the project up front to try to mitigate most of the traffic impact, you won't realize those profits through taxes.
Yeah, we did talk to our finance director, and me and assistant city manager spoke to First Ryan, our financial advisor, about, you know, the process we would use possibly if this project was approved. And so they went out, talked to the folks that could lend us money, and you know, quoting David Cheapwood, he said, "I feel good about the city being able to finance it." And it's really a mix of debt and cash, however we want to pay for it. So we did reach out to them to say, you know, there's a potential project out there, not budgeted, not in the CIP. So can we afford it? And that's when they went out and spoke to their folks that do these kind of things.
And so even if we don't approve this, even if we don't approve a single new unit in Belmont, the intersection's a problem now. And there's tons of issues with it now, and it has to be fixed now. And so if we've got the county who says, well, we'll reimburse you $5 million of this, I feel that gets us closer. If this doesn't happen, then we've got an intersection that needs to be fixed and $10 million to scrounge up, and I'm thinking it's probably not going to get done. And it remains a problem whether we improve this development or not.
But who has ownership of this road? The city or NCDOT?
Well, yes, but
NCDOT has this, and it's been kind of often on the project list. Now, again, I understand where you're coming from. Ultimately, will we ever receive the funding from NCDOT to pay for this project? That's never going to happen. Question, right? I mean, we've got South Point Road, we've got all these other roads. But again, I also want to be clear on the ownership of this road as well.
But I mean, that was the whole point of the bond campaign, was that
Agreed.
we don't want to wait for NCDOT to do all this stuff because
the bond campaign also failed.
Well,
It's not passed.
When would the, remind us again when the reimbursement would be triggered?
So the reimbursement would occur as you get the contract, you get to the point where the contractor has got notice to proceed, they go out to start working. you'll start getting pay applications for all the work. When you get that pay application, you'll pay the entire amount. Let's say it's $100,000. We're going to send you $50,000 every time that you get a pay application that you're obligated to pay for. So you're not going to, if you do go out for financing, you're not going to have to finance our section of it, and then we reimburse you at the end. We have some interim interest in it. We're going to be paying you as it goes along.
And just so we're clear, because I feel we've sort of talked about this obliquely, but for the benefit of those who might not be intimately familiar with this, when we're talking about these holistic intersection improvements, so what the TIA said they needed to do was build a southbound left turn lane off of Park with 125, 150 feet of storage, and a westbound left turn lane off of Catawba down Keener with 275 feet of storage. And the TIA concluded that if they made both of those improvements, they would offset, they would mitigate the impact caused by their development. And, you know, again, TIAs, now I was gonna ask Mike to come up, but I guess I'll testify myself if I have to.
I've got the slide of your improvements too. I've got a slide that depicts the improvements.
Right, so when we're saying holistic, what we're doing is what you're proposing to do is go beyond what even the TIA called for and add left-bound turn lanes at every approach to the intersection, as well as add a northbound right turn lane from Keener on to East Catawba. And Brady's not here, Kimberly Horn's not here, but Mr. Holder, you're a traffic engineer, consultant.
Former Belmont resident?
Former Belmont resident. I mean, so you're familiar with TIAs, and all the TIA has to do is offset, basically put it back to where it was before their development. And this proposal would go beyond that, would it not? It would actually make it better than what it is today, significantly.
Yes.
And it would also save time and money, because instead of doing southbound left, westbound left as part of the TIA, and then at some point later doing the rest of the intersection improvements, so that you'd have two situations where you'd have all these issues, you do it all in one fell swoop, is that correct?
That's correct.
And so is it the engineer's opinion that this more than offsets the mitigation required and the additional traffic being added to the intersection by this project?
That is correct. As Ms. Farrow's address or presentation earlier intimated, that Kimberly Horn reviewed the conceptual design, the county funding did, and it did meet the mitigation for the site trips generated by this particular development. And then it also went above and beyond as a conceptual design, because it adds approaches, or left turn lanes, on every approach, instead of just on two approaches on the time. It also adds one park.
But again, we're anchoring this from the TIA that was conducted in 2022. The only piece that I look at, and again, think about it in regards to where we are in the timeline from COVID. If you think about 2020, work from home, 2021, big stuff, work from home, 2022, there's still a lot of businesses and folks that were working from home during this period. Now, more recently, in 2024, 2025, you see a lot of these big banks, these big corporations in downtown Charlotte requiring employees back to a minimum of 3 days in the office, if not 4 or 5. So again, I'd still argue to say that that the TIA from the 2022 traffic counts could potentially be lower than what they are today.
But if we were going to base our decision on the 2022 TIA, I agree with you. But their proposal goes beyond that, so it doesn't.
But we're saying that beyond the 2022 TIA, what's to say what the existing or current new TIA would identify?
All the TIA, all that TIA said was southbound left, westbound left. This is proposing left turns in all approaches plus a right.
No, I understand that, but I'm just saying, again, we're referencing, going back to an anchor of the 2022 TIA and what it defined at that time to what it's existing currently.
I think we're
But I
not not on the same page.
No, I think that's a valid point.
Well, I mean, just for reference, my firm does TIAs across all of North Carolina. And each unified development code or development code, whatever it's called in each particular governmental jurisdiction, has a different requirement. Belmont's requires a mile of area influence relative to the development and the intersections that are within that mile radius relative to impact. You know, Tiffany quoted the time requirements that exist in the UDO. Those are different in Cary. They're different in Duck. They're different in every community based on the requirements that have been set in that community. It improves it to yes, it does, to a C from an F. Yes, in peak hour. But you always want to build, as I've presented to you guys before, you want to build not based on peak hour, but on mitigating as much as you can in the peak hour. If you build the peak hour, all roads would be 6 or 7 lanes wide.
And it brings it from an F to a C based on the 22 data, correct?
Yes, sir.
And that's for the intersection as a whole, that's one grade for the entire intersection, not the approaches.
It's the operational grade for all 4 approaches in the intersection.
But I believe we've talked about it as a whole, but I believe the approaches for each, or the data for each approach is also in the memo that Brady wrote.
Yes, sir, it is.
This would require significant right-of-way acquisition at the corner where Watson Insurance is located, correct?
It does, but it doesn't take Watson Insurance. There was a
Any-
feasibility study that was done by the department prior to the conceptual design that Gannett Fleming did that was much more extensive from the right-of-way perspective, and the lane widths were lighter on all approaches and on the right turn lanes. So we took that and made a more practical design to minimize the amount of utilities being relocated, which reduces cost, and also minimize the amount of right-of-way being taken, which therefore also reduces cost. You don't want to relocate Watson Insurance. I know that was a contention that has been contentious before. You want to minimize as much right-of-way, and you'll note that the green is the right-of-way takes that will be necessary as part of the implementation of the design. The orange is the construction easements that will be necessary to build the asset and the facility to run the construction. And then the purple, which is to the south on Park, is where the utility easements will be needed to relocate the existing utility lines.
Can you repeat that again on the orange? I'm sorry.
The orange is construction easements.
And what does that mean? Just in
It means a
layman's terms?
temporary taking.
Okay.
So we'll have an agreement with the property owner that we can use 20 foot of their front yard, or whatever the case may be, on a temporary basis, and then it's restored at the conclusion of the project to its existing situation.
So back to the corner of where Watson is located, similar to what you proposed, I think, with South Point Road, because the lanes are wider than what's required.
Right.
You're saying that through lane tapering and I guess whatever other methods you might be able to employ there, you're suggesting that you could add that right turn lane on the Catawba at that corner without having to take any of Watson's property?
We will take some of Watson's property.
In terms
It's
of
just
right
we
of way,
won't
construction, you won't
We
actually.
won't take the whole building.
Sure.
Yeah. The challenge as part of our design was to minimize the right of way needed at that corner to put, squeeze that turn lane in and not take the building. It'll take some of the parking that's out front. As you turn that radius, you bring that radius around.
Sure.
But it won't take the building.
But that corner, is it safe to say that entire area of green on that corner, that would be new construction, new pavement there?
Not, the red line that you see, Councilman,
Yeah.
is where the permanent right of way will be. So it pretty much follows the green line around that.
Yeah.
But there is a possibility to squeeze that in even more. Keep in mind, this is a conceptual design, because once we do more engineering on it, we can refine it to the point of getting more granular, where we can mitigate the impact to Watson Insurance as much as possible. I mean, our charge, if we're the designer, would be to mitigate, minimize utility impacts as much as possible, because that minimizes dollars, and minimize right of way needed as much as possible, because therefore minimizes dollars. And we
estimated 6.72 million for construction and utilities and right of way. And our goal would be to try to creatively engineer it in where we could do it for less than that. But there's been some time since this concept and construction inflation is a real thing. So I'm not being extremely optimistic about that one.
Can you speak to before and after the lane widths that you're proposing, where they are now versus what?
The right turn lane going south on Park or Keener, turning onto Tyler Avenue going west is very generous. So we're capturing back some of that existing pavement width. We've got 11-foot lanes that we're going to design across the intersection, across the approaches themselves, which is exactly the same thing that we proposed on South Point Road, taking advantage of squeezing a cross section in. It's perfectly safe. It's used all across this state. DOT uses it a lot to thread the design in tight spaces.
And generally speaking, with most of those lanes currently, how much excess over 11 feet do we have?
You're probably at 11 and a half, 12 feet at most. That right turn lane going south is probably 14 feet. It's very generous.
I do want you to know, you're not approving this plan. This plan
Yeah.
is very high level conceptual from the bond program, so we use that as a way to come to an amount so we can work with the county on the interlocal agreement. So the interlocal agreement is setting up the framework so that we can hire an engineer, whether it's Gannett Fleming or whether it's whoever else. And that full design will come to you all at some point in the future. So I don't want us to get caught up on like, are we gonna take the building, are we gonna acquire all those properties, whatever that may be. It's gotta be a full design, and then we'll fully know. So I just wanna say that we're not, this right here, we're not approving at all, this design for this project.
But this is the holistic solution to mitigate the developer's traffic and to address underlying safety and traffic congestion concerns at this intersection. And the answer, I think, I'm not anticipating your question, Councilman, but just to go back to the concern about the accounts relative to November 22. I mean, obviously, you could apply 2 years of background growth to that, whether it's 2.5% to 3% to existing background traffic. But the fact of the matter is, if you do that, you run a full analysis, it's probably still going to be a C during peak hour. It's going to move more traffic more efficiently through this updated cross section. And so you can go back and recount it, but you're going to come to the same result with this improvement by adding approaches on all four approaches. Keener's already 4 lanes.
The only just question I want to understand, because, we ran into this with, let's say, like the Del Webb. I mean, I think it's just to try to compare it. So when we deal with the payment in lieu and then potential property acquisitions or condemnation, we get into, okay, well, maybe we're not approving this plan, but then later down the road, it then becomes a conversation, let's say the Del Webb instance, where you got First Presbyterian and then you got Duke Energy. Okay, so what's the city going to do in that situation? And then it tends that one piece of property needs to be taken a little bit more, so then so what I'm trying to get at is I do think it's important for us to understand, ideally how much we're going to have to take. I mean, secondly speaking too, I mean, again, have we discussed this with Watson Insurance? I mean, have they been a part of the conversation? Has anyone approached them? I guess that would be on the cities if this got approved. I'm just curious if anyone has discussed this.
Yeah, there's a whole series.
I have not discussed it. The city has not discussed it with Watson. It was not part of the transportation bond project. We don't have an interlocal agreement to even start the project, so we didn't start to go out and speak to property owners about taking property. No.
I think someone did approach someone, some party did approach them about this, and there was zero interest.
Right, and acquisition, well, voluntary acquisition.
Right.
Right. There's a series of actions, Councilman, that would occur after the interlocal agreement is executed. Belmont advertises for an engineer to do this design, to do exactly, to bring to 30% design, bring to about 50% design when you've got right-of-way limits set, you've got construction easement set, and then you can go out and start having a public hearing where you can show a public hearing map, the affected property owners come, and you can demonstrate to them very succinctly how much of their property is going to be needed, how much the city needs to take to effect this improvement.
But then it's a done deal. Yeah. Can't really walk back.
Well,
I guess the way that you could also look at it though is regardless, that property is gonna be needed to take in order to get the intersection to the improvement it needs to be at.
that's right.
Right. So again, it's which way you look at it.
Any other questions from Mike? If not, maybe we've heard from Donnie, we've heard from Mike, we probably need to hear from Withers.
Yeah, I'm gonna ask Bill and Joe to come up, talk about the sewer. Thank you.
All right, good evening, everybody. Joe Turner with Withers Ravenel, professional engineer, civil engineer, water, wastewater, also Belmont Revenue. Withers Ravenel, as you know, has been working on sewer capacity study for the town of Belmont for some time now. We've presented some preliminary results to you that identify some areas where you have capacity constraints and serious concerns for capacity during wet weather, talked about 2 and 5 year storms, being those occasions that we're focused on during the presentation of the modeling study. I guess following that last presentation, my colleague did approach by Lab Purser to model the impacts that may occur from adding flows from the Crescent development to the Belmont system. We presented a memo, I believe a draft memo, to planning. It's been shared here, and you had some opportunity to review some of the outcomes of that. To make it very brief, dry weather capacity, pipes have capacity for it. There's no concerns about the flows coming from Crescent development into the system. During wet weather, 2 year and 5 year, your existing system has capacity issues, right? So that's without Crescent development. With Crescent development, you have capacity issues, right? And what does that mean? If we look at some of those maps that had the red lines on them, and the orange lines on them, that means that the pipe could be 85% full, could be 90% full, or 100% full. Is that an issue during a storm? No, not always. The issues during the storms are when the pipes are full and they begin to fill up the manhole, and then the manhole is full to the point where it overflows, right? That's the issue. That's what we're trying to prevent when we're operating our sewer systems, right? So there's been discussion about the contribution that Crescent Development's prepared to make. It's $300,000. They mentioned how that number came about. I believe it has to do with the alternative that was discussed, where you could route the flow from Crescent Development to another location. By the way, I believe that downstream system is still has capacity concerns. It's not, doesn't get rid of the problem overall in your system. But I believe that that number is related to maybe a cost per foot of sewer. So overall, I believe that the purpose of that money would be to put it towards inflow and infiltration reduction program, which the city is already talking about doing in other parts of the city, specifically like North Belmont area. North Belmont area, we have lots of data. The town used an AIA grant to do a lot of surveying. So the model is very tight there. We have a lot of flow meter data for that area that gives us a very high degree of certainty that there's big issues there.
per the study, that was where most of our I&I is coming from in the North Belmont area. That's attributing to potentially kind of like the capacity issues that we're having. And then just for folks, correct me if I'm wrong, but for folks that don't know, like the I&I is where we're getting infiltration from places that should not essentially be in our sewer or our lines, correctly?
Correct.
Going down to the plant, such as water runoff or wastewater or such
Yeah,
like
things
that.
that like shouldn't be like in those sewer, yeah.
Infiltrate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So inflow is anything that flows directly into the sewer. It could be a manhole that's missing a top, or a clean out that's missing. It could be a broken pipe, or a contractor that connected a storm pipe to a sanitary pipe that should have been made. Some kind of damage that's occurred within the pipe, and it's allowing a point source of flow, where infiltration is usually happening through cracks, poor joints, separating joints, defects in manholes, and things like that.
So you guys looked at both, obviously the city, and looking at this area for the project itself. So what is the opportunity with correcting the I&I? I mean, when we look at the pipes today existing, we got them at capacity in the 2-year rain event and then the 5-year rain event, maybe 2 or 3 more kind of highlight red. So the 300K, like in your, like I know that's just for the testing so that we can identify it, but what is the cost, or what would be your assumption in regards to what is the go get to try to fix our existing issue? I'm trying to tie this dollar to, I understand the testing, but for actually implementing it into action, what does that do for us?
I have the same question. How do you correlate that with, because we haven't even quantified the problem yet. We just got the results back, and the smoke testing is purely diagnostic. So in terms of like remediating the problem, is the 300,000 somewhat arbitrary in that case? Or is it tied to some sort of mathematical formula or cost estimate? What?
Yeah, like I said, I think that was initially a comparison of linear foot of pipe that it would take to connect Crescent to another outfall. I've had the question by multiple people now. Like, if I spend $300,000, how much rainwater can we remove? And you can't put a dollar on it. You can't put a volume to a dollar. It's not a gallon per dollar or anything like that. What you can do with $300,000, and please don't hold me to these numbers, but this is, I'm trying to give you an answer. Jonathan mentioned 41 cents per foot on sewer smoke testing. There's another number we could throw out, $3 to $5 for closed circuit television inspection of trunk sewers. So you can start to break it down in that way. What we have the advantage right now of having a model that's identified the red pipes, right? So we can take those dollars and look at the linear feet of pipe, and we can go out and say, the most informed we can get about this area is by, running a camera up it, and if we want to quantify the impact of any future improvements that we make, we do some flow metering, because then you start to see us spend money in a flow meter before we make an improvement, and then a flow meter after we make an improvement. You can start to put $1 per gallon, something like that. But all of these systems are really different. I can tell you about a project I did in Quail Hollow on the golf course. We're going up through the neighborhood, using a model there, and we're seeing tens of thousands of gallons get into the sewer system when it rained. Quail Hollow's a nice area, everything's built well, pipes are all a little bit leaky, but what we found using the model and flow metering was we were able to trace the system to a point, to an inflow source. And it was another situation where a contractor thought, this is a low-lying area, I'll drain it by busting a hole in it. And so instead of having to spend $300,000 lining however many thousand feet of pipe, we're able to go out there and make a point repair on the pipe, just much less. And so that's why it's hard to put $1 on a volume of rainfall that you can remove.
Well, and before you even do the diagnostic, before you do the smoke testing, before you set the cameras, you can't quantify the problem. You can't locate, like to your point in that example, you can't locate sources are.
Because who's to say if it's, like in that example, it sounds like the majority of the issues coming from one source point, but who's to say that that's could or could not be the case in North Belmont, right, by the data that we have today? Could be problem extrapolated over multiple different issues that we have up there, which we know are old lines that we have up there, right? But on the other hand, then you could yield one big opportunity and then, you know, the white whale, and then you fix it, right? So.
And I just want to point out, I don't think it was any of the slides, excuse me for my allergies here, but there was one area where the model predicts, you know, potential overflow. It's one single manhole. It's an area that you can go out and investigate pretty easily. And if I can talk like a local, if you're leaving here and you go up Taba and turn on to South 10th Street, you go over the railroad tracks and hang a right on Parkdale. You know where we're going. Over the tracks and down to the area where people used to throw couches and TVs and stuff like that.
That's
Right.
very local language.
Yeah, so look over to the right and up along that creek or that draw there. That's where your red pipes are. That's a low-lying area. It's prone to infiltration. It's prone to all kinds of problems. It's not in an easy to get to place. I said that manhole's easy to get to, but the pipe and the rest of that system is not. So we can hone in on some areas and spend money wisely and hopefully get the returns that we're looking for as a result of that. But at a minimum, you're getting money to put into your I&I reduction program, which is, you know, pretty critical.
So what, I guess, you know, they've asked you to come and provide, you know, answers to questions and an opinion. In your professional opinion, you know, is this 300,000 meaningful? Will it, you know, what is it? What's your opinion of the 300,000 and what it will accomplish, and how does it impact your view of this project?
Again, for dry weather, there's no issue. For wet weather, there's already an issue. If we're spending $300,000 and we're targeting where we're spending that money, it can make a significant impact to offset anything that's going on.
So assuming that money gets earmarked for smoke testing right away, I think the metric Jonathan mentioned to you too was it 46 cents
About 41 cents per foot of pipe.
Well, not that one, but was that?
It's $46 per linear foot to slip line.
Right,
sewer line.
but the other metric, it could alternatively be used for, I think this was in the conversation about the smoke testing. How far could that $300,000 go towards the smoke testing? Zero.
You could do, I think North Belmont, we're looking at being around 55,000, so.
Really, for the entire area?
For the entire North Belmont.
Okay, that's helpful.
But that's in addition to the system development fee that we have for the sewer. So I think they share that slide too, so you're getting, city receives, you know, the water and the sewer system development fees. So the sewer side, I don't recall the exact number, but is it 400,000, 300,000? One of those, so that's $300,000 in addition to what the commitment is for system development fee. And those system development fees are used to help out with infrastructure, CIP projects, and doing these kind of things as well.
Any other questions? I mean, maybe the question is for Bill, where the 300,000 comes from. I mean, you've sort of indicated where your understanding, but perhaps Bill knows firsthand where the 300,000 number comes from. Can someone?
I do. I was going to share that.
Okay.
But Jack, you just said that the sewer system is making a $700,000 upfront fee on the tap fee system development.
Yeah, 730, yeah.
Do I, Mayor Pro Tem, and other members of council, and Mr. Braswell and Mr. Wilson, I'm Bill Stark and I live in Mechanical. And I was just asked to just share a little bit of context on where we came up with the $300,000. Street and connect into another area that would go on down to where Joe was talking about. And it really wouldn't have any impact on didn't hit any red lines that's the way we understood it that night. So the next day, we calculated the number of feet. We contacted a couple of sewer contractors, and we came up with a number of, it was gonna cost about $300,000 to run this line that wouldn't have any negative impact on the current situation. And so then we reached out to Miles, and since Withers Ravenel is your consultant, Miles and Kevin set up a meeting in your office there with Withers Ravenel, and we began discussing more in detail about how we could run this sewer line and not impact the current system. And as we were talking about that, Jonathan Wilson said, wait a minute, why? I would really prefer, instead of you all putting in more lines for us to take care of, I would rather you all make a contribution to our sewer project. So that's where it was gonna cost $300,000 to put in the new line. And so as a group, we decided, we want to do whatever makes the most sense for Belmont, and that's where the $300,000 came from.
Any questions? Thank you.
One more bit of information to add. Mr. Levison advises that the first residents, if this were approved and moves forward, would occupy the community in 28 to 29. So we appreciate you listening to our presentation, and appreciate your questions and comments, and we're happy to answer additional questions. But we'll close out our presentation. Thank you.
I wasn't sure if we were gonna have other people come up, but could someone speak to sort of the evolution of the townhouse and multifamily components from inception, 2020, I guess it was, with the original plan to where we are now with those two components? I know commercial, we covered that, but specifically townhome and multifamily.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and council members, staff. Thank you. Councilman Rumsfeld, the evolution, if I'm getting your question correctly, was there was a lot of interest to see for-sale townhomes. And that evolution happened over months and months and years, but we did make the commitment that that was going to be the product for the townhomes. And more specifically, maybe what.
Just in terms of number of units, from the original plans to now.
Well, the original number of units, even with the townhomes, were for rent. We were presenting it as a rent product.
And there was how many units then in 2020, roughly?
I would go back and look up an oversight thing, but off my head, I don't know.
Because in 2020, you're saying, I was on a council then, it was 100% rentals, multifamily.
Correct.
Okay.
It was a combination of flats and townhomes. 100% rent.
Gotcha.
Is it fair to say that the density and the number of flats, as you call them, increased as you took more and more off of Frady Field and ultimately left Frady Field untouched?
The number of flats were similar, not materially different, over the various versions of the plan. When we completely pulled off the idea or vision or thoughts about developing on Frady, we did have the fourth level included on building C and D. increased more recently through discussions with various stakeholders, over the 10, 11 acres, 5 acres.
Additional questions? Thank you.
I do, sorry. I think it's kind of important to know, can you say that again, the timeline of anticipated, if this was to be approved, can we walk through the timeline in this?
So I would project that the first residents would move in the years 2028 to 2029. We will be approximately a year, if this application is approved, we will be approximately a year just working on the pre-development and the due diligence and the engineering and architectural requirements that go into the project. So we would not even break ground for at least a year plus. And then we're a year and a half and 2 years of construction. So that's why I was saying 2028 to 2029.
So what does that look like for the road construction?
Well, that's what I'm trying to tie into. So what's the phased approach for the overall development? So you've got the townhomes, you've got the apartments, you've got the commercial. Again, theoretically, if this was to be approved, what is the preliminary phased construction?
It's not going to be in phases.
It's going to be all at once?
It's all at once, correct. There's a lot of infrastructure and it's economically it's better to do it all at once. There's one.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Does that conclude your presentation?
It does, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, at this time, Parks, it would be appropriate for a motion to go out of public hearing.
Motion to come out of public hearing.
Second.
A motion made by Alex, seconded by Charlie, all in favor? Aye. All right, any opposed? None. We are out of public hearing. That leads us to item B2, consider approval of an ordinance for ZA 2023-06 Crescent Development, a request to rezone a 13.68 acre site to Downtown District Conditional District, DDCD, to accommodate a mixed-use master plan community. So I believe we have revised ordinances here in front of us with revised conditions. Can we just discuss without a motion pending, Parks? We can deliberate? All right, well, let's deliberate.
So I just kind of want to start off, because I just want to make sure I 110% understand this financing piece or the finance piece. Maybe this is just for staff right now, not in regards to the road, right? So if implementation or when they're anticipating residents to start moving in 2028, I believe it was, 2028, we're 2025, coming towards the middle of 2025. My biggest concern with this is that we're going to get ourselves in a financial burden. And I want to discuss this out. Miles, I want to hear y'all's opinion too on this, because we just went through the budget process. We have identified capital improvement projects that we've identified as a necessity today. If we add this on, I guess I'm coming up with the issue, even with the county's partnership, how do we fund this? That's what I want to understand. I think the intersection, Jim, I'll agree with you. I think there's still a point to understand a little bit further in 2022 TIA versus now. But I do am willing to agree that the intersection improvement for what is being proposed would be better than what it is obviously today and potentially mitigate for what the professionals say the project itself. But my concern is financing and paying for this thing as a city without increasing the taxes for the overall residents piece. I do not think that's fair that we increase taxes for everyone to help fund this particular project. And the reason why I say that is because we proposed a bond with similar projects proposed and identified that the residents voted down, that they did not want their taxes increased to fund these road improvements. That's where I'm struggling in this kind of process here. So I don't know, Jim or Miles, if anybody wants to kind of comment on that.
I mean, just for facts, the general fund balance as of 6/30/2024 was $15,703,271. So if you're looking at ways to fund, I mean, this might be a good time for Jared Piles to come up to help me out as we walk through financing potentially. You know, at Crescent, if their annual tax revenue that they stated full build out, I guess the city would receive $290,000 based on the county's estimate of what their property's taxes are. I mean, it's a combination of debt, if council's comfortable with taking, you know, several $1 million to fund the project in anticipation of revenues coming from the project.
Well, I know we also have our policy about 12%.
Our fund balance policy.
Yes.
We also have a debt policy.
That's the
as well.
debt, that debt should be no more than like 12%. I don't know what would be rolling off or anything that.
It would
or how
have to
that
be
would
something substantial, because we've got, that's where I'm trying to understand it piece. We've got projects, if you look at that first triangle model, we've got projects that are rolling on that we're gonna be going out to debt services or financing that through that. This is not in that budget, that forecast, if you will, that we approved in the outlook. This would be in addition to that. And my concern is like I said, I don't want us to be in a position where we're gonna have to raise taxes in order to pay for this. That's my hiccup.
Well, if you have a debt policy and you don't want to exceed your debt limit, then you have available fund balance, so that you won't hit that debt limit at some time. And you, just like First Tryon does when they come here, you turn projects on, turn projects off based on your priorities. So if this becomes a priority, and we want to remain at our debt policy limit, you don't want to spend more than X dollars in unassigned fund balance. It's a balance of all of it. And Jared, you can fill in the blanks for me.
No, I think you hit the nail on the head, and it could be a blended approach. We could use fund balance, debt service. The debt service policy is in place, but there are provisions in the debt policy that you can increase that threshold, but it would be a temporary increase, and there would have to be a plan of action to bring that level of debt back down. Tiffany just also mentioned that there's a $400,000 payment in lieu that could be applied towards this project.
The Crescent, right? Or
Yes.
not the Crescent, Chronicle.
Yes.
It's 100,000. Well, or I see what you're saying. It's 100 from Chronicle, 300 from, yeah.
Yep. And also, as Miles alluded to, yes, there are CIP projects in that model that are identified as debt service, but we can always turn those to cash flow. Priorities can change on that model. So it's kind of multifaceted. There's a lot of things at play.
This goes back to prioritization, right? How we prioritize this project versus some of the other ones we've identified to be funded by them.
But, I mean, yes, I don't think we should raise taxes for this. I agree. But I don't know if, it sounds as though there are multiple options that we wouldn't necessarily have to do that.
I guess the other.
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead, Jim.
I just don't think we're given the realities that we've seen with DOT, I don't know if we're ever going to get as close to improving this intersection as we do through this proposal. That, yes, it's gonna require some thinking and some creativity on our part, but I'd rather try and figure out how to come up with like $4.7 million than try and figure out how to come up with $10 million. And I just, I don't see this being improved by the state anytime in our lifetime. And it's a problem now whether we add a single additional unit or not. And I don't know, I think it would be a great benefit to the city and its residents if we were able to improve that intersection. And I don't know if there'd be another opportunity where the stars would align to enable us to do that in our lifetime. Well, at least in our careers, I don't know about lifetime.
Depends who's paying for it. I mean, the other piece too, so again, we talk about residents moving in 2028, we talk about mid-2025 now. I mean, what is the turnaround time on mobilization to get a project like this completed?
Yeah, so we have a master services agreement with like multiple engineering firms, civil engineering firms that we could ask for proposals at this time. I mean, if council wanted us to do that, we could do that tomorrow and see how much a project would cost. Or the other option is an RFQ. The RFQ process would take probably, if we did it today, it'd probably take at least a month for us to have somebody ready to break the wall to the next steps on that. Then we'd go under contract with a design firm. The design for this project, Mike Holder probably could help me out with this, so I would think that the design, shake your head yes, is it a 12-month project for design?
About 9 months.
9 months for design, so you're completed design at that point. When you're completed design, you're ready to go out to bid for a project of this magnitude. Mike, is this an 18-month project? Is this a 12-month project? 15 to 18-month project. So you're looking from today, that's a calculation of what, 2 years for us to be, completed the project. Negotiations for right-of-way acquisition is, I don't have a guess, I don't know if Mike has a guess, it's really the back and forth between property owners.
Yeah, you got, probably 10 parcels, 8, 9 parcels to negotiate with, so.
How many, sorry, Mike, how many?
Probably about 9 to 10, councilman, and it's, just rough 3 months at the, or
Mike,
at the best, 3 to 6 months.
Hey, Mike, come to the microphone.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Thanks, Jerry.
Jim's upset, he was ready to come out of public.
Yeah, that's all right. We all need to be flexible.
And you included utility relocation in that estimate of, I think you said 18 months for construction?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Because there's a lot of things that could go on concurrently.
Yeah.
A lot of activities. So the contractor wouldn't work in the utility areas, they'd work in other areas, and the utilities would be located, and move to those particular areas. I mean, it's a pretty compact work zone.
So the project seems like they, we don't try to put that into the agreement, it'd be our responsibility to make sure it's complete at the right time. But just what Mike, referred to as far as like the timing as related to when the project is complete, folks to move in, it's 28, 29, at probably about the time that the project will be probably wrapping up, 28, 29.
Yeah, let's say you just authorize design, and we're in June, say September, October, a year 26, you'd have right away by probably mid-27, and then 15 months for construction, so you'd be right after the mid date.
But is that, Mike, honestly, is that in today's world where we have a lot of the prioritization out west with a lot of the contractors and stuff like that doing work out there?
Yeah, that's realistic, Councilman.
And then another question too, on the $10 million as it pertains to what we're assuming this project cost is, can we just determine remind me what year this came from, the $10 million?
Well, let's clarify the $10 million.
That's the maximum.
What the amount was I called out was $7.7 million, if we want to go back to that.
Yeah, like cost of the overall project.
So, like I say, city staff estimated the design and permitting at $1,009,500, so $1 million bucks. And then you got, I use Gannett Fleming's estimates, you've got right-of-way acquisition at $730,000, utility relocation at $2,800,000, construction at $3,200,000. And so if I do the math, I think that's $7.7 million.
Yeah.
Is it 7.7?
And what year did we estimate that?
The estimate was done 6 months ago. It was before, well, maybe a little longer than that, it was before the bond.
It was May of last year.
It was about a year ago.
Yeah, May 20.
And Mike, what is the average percent? I mean, you even talked about it in regards to cost inflation, in regards to road projects.
Well, inflation has come down recently tremendously. I mean, consumer price index is about 2.3% now. So I would say construction inflation is probably running about 3 to 3.5.
So the time we've got to bid is a year from now, so we're looking at like 6% on top of 7.7 million.
Probably about 4.5 to 5, I think would be conservative. Yeah.
8.1 or so. No, from the 10. I thought percentage was 10. Well, that's true.
Yeah, just as editorial comment for the developer's contribution for the county county's contribution, you know, for what the city puts in. I know we're out of public meeting, public hearing, but you're getting a tremendous improvement in your asset base for fairly, I mean, obviously significant amount of investment. Still, you know, look at it, you're paying basically a quarter, the developer in the county is paying the bulk of the investment. You're getting a tremendous piece of asset. Does anybody remember why we didn't have this on the bond?
Because it was gonna be part of this, that we thought we could get, you know, the contribution from the county, that if we got that, we could figure out the rest and we wouldn't need to put it in the bond.
Based on that list of projects that was prioritized by staff, and again, at Fleming, it was number 2, just part of number 2, and we presented that to you all.
And that's reflective of the pedestrian issues and the vehicular impacts that, you know, occur there. A lot of rear end collisions, property damage, just because of the nature of the traffic.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thanks, Mike.
And Miles, just before I did notice in the agenda memo and the staff memo for this item, it says, staff recommends approval, so is it staff's position that this project be approved? I mean, well, you know, it was mentioned during public comment as well.
While we're talking about staff, would it be inappropriate to hear from Chief on, if we're talking about dangerous intersections in town? I wouldn't mind getting his perspective as well while we're at it, if you don't mind.
Maybe while he walks up here, I am curious to that question though. If it does have a correct staff recommendation of approval, was that just in there by mistake, or is that actually staff's
I
recommendation?
think this is, Tiffany's probably improved that order, you know.
So in fairness, it very well could be a carryover, but just as a reminder, in terms of process planning, staff does make a recommendation typically to Planning and Zoning Board. So this agenda item in ICUP is copied and then mirrored for you guys and then updated with a few items. But staff did make a recommendation to support this project to Planning and Zoning Board. However, when it comes to you all, our recommendations are null and void, and we defer to the recommendation of Planning and Zoning Board, which again did make a unanimous recommendation of the board.
Planning and zoning board made that recommendation before the sewer information, right?
That is correct, but typically they don't necessarily weigh in as heavily on the utility side of things, but rather the land use side of things. They did hear the information related to transportation.
Please, yeah.
Good evening.
Just would like to get your perspective on this intersection. You know, you stated several times that this is the third most dangerous intersection in town. Do you have anything to offer on that assertion, or do you agree with it, or?
There's definitely a need for improvements at this intersection. There's a little bit of a side distance issue coming like southbound and stuff because of traffic. Thankfully, the speed limit's been reduced by the state. A lot of people got upset about that a long time ago, but it was a very good thing considering the volume of traffic we have. I feel like that the things that's been mentioned would definitely help, especially with traffic, not just the dangerousness of the intersection. We don't have that many collisions at this intersection. We do have people who run the red light because of where it's in the sag. And we have, you know, we do things out there, you know, write tickets and stuff, enforcement action and such. It's a wide intersection. It's a very large intersection. So anytime you have a very large, wide intersection like that, you're going to have people who run the red lights because they feel like, you know, just because of the layout of where it's at. As far as the third most dangerous intersection of the city, I think that was through our Vision Zero meetings and stuff. That's where we came up with that, as we were identifying the different intersections that were issues in the city that needed to be addressed, and that's just one of them. It's not the most, but there's definitely, I think these improvements will be great for that intersection and may actually help with the flow of traffic, especially in the evenings.
Do any of the improvements include, I mean, I know we're talking about adding left turn lanes on all 4 approaches, but I don't know that we've heard anything about improvements to like the crosswalks or the pet head, I mean, we've got pet heads there now. Sorry, on all four?
There is where you push the button, there is one there at that intersection that was put in probably around a year and a half ago. They redid the sidewalk and it's on the southbound side of the intersection on the Watson's insurance side. There is a ped
We
head.
did make some ped improvements there before. Alex, were you on council? It might have been before Alex, but we approved them. I think it took a little bit of time for them to be implemented, yes.
Within the last year and a half, one of those took place.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So maybe to further narrow our discussion, we talked about some areas of relief that they were proposing from there are 5 or 6, and I didn't hear anyone really have any concerns about any of those areas of relief, like the townhome spacing, private open space, angled parking. I know Alex asked some questions, no pervious pavement, no bicycle boulevard. The only thing, and we haven't really, the building height of the 2 buildings in the back, but based on, where they are and the sight lines and everything. But do we have any issues with any of the proposed areas of relief, or are we going to need to focus our conversation on bigger picture items?
I don't have anything.
Would the big picture items include conditions, or are you looking for that now?
No, I'm just saying that these are areas, so there's conditions that we're going to, should we approve it, there would be conditions that we put on it, but these are areas of relief that the zoning code requires X, and they want not to do X or whatever. So they're a little slightly different, and I didn't really, maybe we could not, that's not the issue. The issue is going to be
High density,
all the bigger picture.
Yeah, I agree with you. The floor addition going from 38 to 45 is the one that stood out to me, but you're right, and that's kind of where that comes from. I don't really have an issue with the roof.
Okay, so it's going to be, the things we've been asking all the questions about. So, how, where are we at? I mean, we've got a decision to make.
I know. This is
as much as we
going to
would.
make for like 4 to 5
Yes, but, I mean, all right, if I will go first, if everyone was.
I will stand down. It's usually one first.
All right. I mean, to me, I understand a lot of the issues and the concerns, and certainly to me, the sewer capacity issue is the biggest point of uncertainty and concern. And obviously, we've had a lot of public comment, and I know most of the people providing public comment, and I respect them, and they are on both sides of the issue. So it's a tough one, but to me, I look at 2 things. I look at the intersection. That intersection is terrible. It's terrible now. It'll be terrible if we turn this down. It'll be terrible if we turn down every project that's put before us until the end of time. It's still going to be terrible. And it seems to me that this is the best chance we get. And yes, it's not perfect. I mean, it would be nice if we could just get money. If, hey, the county wants to give us $10 million, we don't have to do anything. But I'd rather have $5 million and make it maybe doable than without the county participating, without the $5 million. There's no way we could do it. We'd have to wait for DOT. And yes, I acknowledge it's a state intersection. But, this just seems to me like the one and best shot that we have to get this right. And if we don't, it's going to continue to be a problem no matter what ends up going on this property. The other big thing is Frady Field. And, I understand all the concerns that people have been talking about, but the fact of the matter is that the applicant currently owns that park. And, I've looked at the lease, I haven't looked at it in a while, but they can terminate that lease on somewhere between 30 and 90 days notice. And, we can talk about what they could and could not do if they go back to the drawing board to turn us down. But, again, this has been a sticky issue for us for years. And again, I think it's our best chance to resolve this issue. They're willing to donate it to us. Again, these things don't come free. They don't come without strings attached. But at the end of the day, I think it would be nice to resolve this and get ourselves this park, which they're willing to donate to us as part of this. We might not have this opportunity again in the future, and I'd like to have it resolved and allow it to continue to be a park, a city park, that would allow us to do some improvements to it that we avoided doing because it's not our property, and why put a bunch of improvements on a park that might go away. So to me, those two things sort of are the big picture items that, we might have to, it would be nice if we could get them without some of the things we don't like about this, but, I forget who said it's all, tends to be about gray areas and it's not always black and white. You can't always get 100% of what you want without having to give up anything. And to me, this is our best chance to resolve the intersection, our best chance to resolve Frady Field. So that's sort of where I stand. But I realize it's a difficult question.
I'll offer up my 2 cents. I'm not gonna take as long as Jim. I agree with Alex. I think if we approve this development, the amount of added traffic will negate the improvements we do on the intersection. According to the 22 TIA, it would go from a D or a F to a C. That's not counting the development. So if we were to do the development, it could go back down to an F. We're right back where we started, having spent millions of dollars on this intersection improvement, and we got nothing to show for it, but still the same amount of traffic in instances. I don't like the apartments. I've been very vocal about that since the beginning. I don't know why there has never been any attempt, I guess, to make individual single-family housing in that area. As you guys pointed out, you did it with Adams Bluff, you did it with Hawthorne. I don't know why we can't have single-family housing right there. I do like the commercial. I wish there was more commercial along the street front, and then the housing behind it. And a point that I didn't see anybody bring up, and I know will happen, is on Saturdays when soccer is going on at Ed Gant, they're gonna run out of parking. Because whoever's at those apartments, they're gonna have parties, they're gonna have people over, they're gonna park in that back row right there. And people will come with their kids to the soccer games and not be able to park at the field. They'll have to park a long way away and walk. That's just the reality of it, and I don't want that. So, for me, I'm against the development.
Well, we could sit here all night,
Yeah.
but at some point, we're gonna have to make difficult decisions. That's why we're over to your office, yes.
I'll offer up some comments. So we've heard a lot of both sides of the argument tonight. I really appreciate everyone's input. I think the project definitely has some compelling attributes. Obviously, we all know it's no secret, it hasn't been for a long time. We need to activate this part of town. The connectivity to downtown is very attractive. I, like Charlie, would like to have seen more commercial component in this project than what we've got, but be that as it may, it is, we can't ignore the fact that we just got these results back on the sewer and water capacity, and none of that's been quantified yet. We haven't even started testing to see what the impact of, whether it's 300,000 from this developer or $1 million from that one. I mean, that could be a drop in the bucket, or it could be a substantial contribution, we just don't know. A lot of what we hear from the residents is that Belmont has for too long gotten out over its skis with approving developments, particularly high-density developments, without the infrastructure to support them. We know we have an issue, just like with everything else that night. We're not worried about dry conditions. We're worried about what happens when we get a lot of rain. And we know we have a severe problem, and that would be obviously amplified, with something like this. The congestion on the top street, obviously, it's already a two-lane road, but at times, sees a lot of choke points. And I think this would add to that from a safety standpoint. I mean, a lot of our transportation committee meetings, a lot of the safety issues actually get brought up more along Keener at R.L. Stowe versus Catawba. That would be more of my concern from a safety perspective. But I think, when you're talking about adding 300 plus new units, 500 plus new cars on that two-lane road, that's going to just increase the congestion that we're already seeing. So for me, I can't, under the current design, I can't explore this amount of high-density housing without having more definitive handle on what the cost of our infrastructure improvements is going to need to be. And the road improvements are nice, we're going to have that at some point, some way. If it comes from this development, great, if it may come from another one. But I can't be in support of the road improvements.
Sure, whatever you go for.
Look, I think it's this one I have always been on the fence on since I started this almost 4 years ago. This was actually the first development plan that I think I met with the team. And I go back and forth a lot, and a lot of it, the cons I agree with what my colleagues have brought up in regards to the sewer. I still have some concerns in regards to how do we pay for this road improvement without implementing a tax increase to the broader citizens of Belmont. That's my concern, because we have been committed, at least over the past 4 years, and Jim as well, prior to me on councils, to holding the tax rate, reducing the tax rate, in order to provide the best value to the benefit to the citizens that are here today. And now I also understand by adding on additional houses or bedrooms, we get additional tax revenues that afford us the ability to do that in some instances. But in the terms in regards of trying to potentially ask the remaining of Belmont to pay for these road improvements, that's where I get hung up on. The sewer capacity issue, I think, the 300K is an extremely nice gesture to try to get us to the I&I. I believe from the sewer capacity study, the I&I is one of our biggest issues that we face that is driving some of these capacity issues. But then we get into the existing infrastructure of that area. And the existing infrastructure of that area is tough. I mean, I lived in East Belmont for 4.5 years. I traveled that all the time. And while folks may say, well, you got the connector, you're coming right off Wilkinson, and you're hitting right into that apartment complex, that's not necessarily true. Me and my wife would drive to downtown Belmont probably multiple times a week to go eat downtown, to go shop downtown, to go doing those events, and I would sit in that traffic. So that's just me. Multiply that by the multitude of how many folks are going to be moving into this particular project. I think the project's nice. I think it's a really well thought out plan. I just think I have more concerns than what I can see the actual benefit of the project itself bringing to the community, particularly in East Belmont. The commercial piece I think is nice. I think we need more commercial to revitalize the East Belmont area, in my opinion. We have to have more options and more ability for people to invest in the area. And what I tell developers when I talk to them is they say the concern is sometimes we sit with the vacancies, but if you're looking off Main Street, and I know maybe some issues with the Chronicle today in regards to some of the vacancies, but if you look off of Main Street, our Main Street is doing extremely well. East Belmont's doing extremely well in regards to whatever the type of businesses are coming in there. So for me, I feel like we can do better, we can do more in regards to the commercial aspect of it. But that's, like I said, I have been back and forth on this one for a long time, but I think that's where I'm going to kind of rest my case on that one for sure.
Gosh. Well, everybody had great points. Before the sewer capacity study came back, I was for this project. I think that East Belmont does need to be activated. I think that we need to revitalize that section of town, and if there were any, houses, apartments, I hate apartments, I'm with Charlie, I'm not a fan of that, but if that's where we were gonna put it, I would prefer it to be on that side of town versus the opposite. Some things that I love about this project is the intersection and the agreement with the county. The money is substantial, but, I love that they would donate the field. I know that the Karstoffens take care of the kids, that's for sure, I do know that, and I appreciate that. But the only problem that I'm hung up on right now is the high density and the sewer capacity. And I know that the high density could potentially be leveled out with the intersection redone. But at the same breath, I still don't know that I morally can say that us adding this amount of homes and people to a sewer situation and problem that we have, and not actually know a quantified amount of what this is gonna cost, morally would be right for me to say, yes, that I agree to this. And I'm sad to say that because I do love this project, and I do see that East Belmont needs it, and what a better person and group to do this than them. But I'm just not sure that right now is the right time.
Well, does anyone wanna make a motion? I don't see if there's any
Is it a
need.
motion to disapprove or a motion to disapprove? Like a motion to disapprove the, development as presented.
All right, motion made by Charlie, is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Catherine. All those in favor of the motion to disapprove the development? Raise your hand. All right, all those opposed? So it passes 4-1. Disapprove. So I believe we still need to make the findings, right? So there'd be a motion that is not, the proposed project is not consistent with the comprehensive land use plan. Is that right? I'm sorry, Kathleen.
Please keep in mind, if you make a motion that the proposed map amendment is not consistent, it will automatically update your comprehensive land use plan. And so with a motion that it is not consistent, please specify how it is not consistent so that we can make the language updates accordingly.
Do we need to do that? So do we need to make that motion? Okay. So,
Think about what she just said. I really don't know exactly what this time is about update your plan.
Tiffany, we need clarification.
How does that work as far as say no, it updates your comp plan?
You can vote no and still find that the proposed plan was consistent with your comp plan. The project is still not approved. But if you make a motion that the project is inconsistent with the comp plan, then I would need to know how in order to make sure that I'm updating the comp plan accordingly. It's possible that it could be consistent with the plan, but still not be in your discretion to approve the project.
And that's a separate motion.
That's a separate motion. So does anyone want to
So
make it?
I would make a, and correct me if I'm wrong, I would make a motion that the proposal, the application meets the comprehensive land use plan, is consistent with the comprehensive land use plan, and does need to say anything.
For the reasons that they were going to put up on the board, earlier. They said you had another slide you were going to.
This was it.
Well, there it is.
So it's consistent with the
Yeah,
goals
that
of
was
land
good
use.
time.
Okay. So I'll make a motion that the plan is, the map amendment is a reasonable request in the public interest, and that it's consistent with the goals of the comprehensive plan in the areas of land use, community character, and economy.
All right, motion made by Jason, seconded by Charlie. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That passes unanimously. All right, so that brings us to item B3 on the agenda, which is interlocal agreement of Gaston County for Park Street and Catawba Street intersection. As I understand it, that was contingent on the approval of the project. The project having been disapproved, that item is now moot. Do we need to do anything else? All right, then there's nothing else on the agenda. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion by Alex, second by Charlie. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, thank you everyone for your time and effort tonight.
I'm in the doghouse.